Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Good afternoon to anybody in my time zone and adjacent, I suppose. Get the camera back up and running. Pretty hot outside today, so I decided I would go live and do catch up on a few videos from PineCreek. I don't know if there's a good time of day to do this or not. I'm kind of playing around with different things. That the Monday or the early Saturday morning one, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it this Saturday, so I'm doing this one kind of to make it up. And depending on how this goes, I might kind of shift things to do more of a late afternoon, early Sunday evening kind of thing. Just depends on availability. So that's why I'm doing kind of my weekly show now. I got a couple shorts that Pine Creek dropped, and I might get into the rest of the last long hangout that he had. But these ones were kind of odd. So I was gonna bring those up and just kind of take a look at him and see what he's been up to. What's I mean, because he usually bases this on something that he's seen that's kind of like triggered him or gotten him piqued his curiosity. Um, that thumbnail looks like me this morning. Yeah, I kind of woke up feeling that way this morning. So good to see you, the monk. Good to see you, Red Fang. And Michael Deaton is here. Thank you very much for the reminder to everybody. Good to see you, Michael. Scott is here. Good to see you. So yeah, there's really no context here. I'm just going to get right into it. Hopefully, volume and everything is okay. So we're going to play this first short. And so it's science or misogyny. Harrison Butker, Jordan Peterson, and then he's got his hashtags. If for those of you who haven't heard about it, Harrison Butker is the kicker. He's I can't even remember what football team. I think it's the Chiefs, right? Kansas City Chiefs. But he gave a commencement speech at Benedictine College, and at that during that speech, he said, Scott says he's a punter. At that speech, he said he got into some kind of like trad wife riff that he decided to get on. Or is it kicker? LL. Yeah, he'd be the kicker. And I think he's actually like a soccer player in maybe in college. I don't know much about him, and I don't follow NFL football that closely. I follow college a little bit, but not pro football is a little boring. KC suck. Red Fang going right on the record, right out the gate. Marty Kamea, good to see you. Nice to have you here. So yeah, anyway, so he got into this kind of riff, and so I guess Doug is doing kind of a mashup between this whole thing and some stuff that Jordan Peterson has said in the past, which about bleeding times. Yeah, I mean, I'm only a day and a half late. It's not a big deal. I knew Saturday was going to be weird because of some things that were going on with family early Saturday, which is why I did the Friday evening one, which went long. That one went for 4 hours. And then, and I figured I would do this one. Maya had said like, hey, why not do one on Saturday and on Sunday? I thought about it. I was thinking about doing the one on Saturday, but I was running out of time for the thing that I had going on out of town and couldn't squeeze it in. Plus, I wasn't really finding anything. I do want to cover. There's a long video that Taco has of a conversation in I think it was like PMars has a room over on Discord or something like that, and he's basically a troll. Darth Dawkins comes in there, and I think that video is an hour and 20 minutes long. Now, I didn't want to cover it right away because Taco likes to let his cook for a little bit. He likes to let him simmer out there for a little bit longer. So, and to review that one, I'm probably going to have to break that one up into at least 3 parts. Because I think Darth is in it throughout the duration of it. And there's some already, I've only watched the first 7 or 8 minutes of it, and there's already some really weird stuff being said. I mean, a lot of it's old rehashed kind of stuff, but some of the stuff coming from PMars is absolutely bonkers. So anyway, here we go. Is there any jokes to be made about that? The hat in and of itself is a joke, but yeah, any jokes you want to make about the hat I'm wearing, do it. So okay, here we go. Good to see you, by the way, Pinworm, and JC Rocket is here too. Some guy named Bomb, good to see you. John May is here. Cutlery Duck is here. Jay says that's because PMars is bonkers. He is, yeah, he's absolutely goofy. So all right, let's see what Doug has for us over here. Let's see here.
On average, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And that's actually the biggest difference we know of psychologically between men and women.
You, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career?
The biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperament and interest are in Scandinavia. The more egalitarian your state, the bigger the personality differences between men and women. And what you
That guy in the hoodie kind of looked like an older, more wizened version of Cy Ten Bruggen.
find is the more egalitarian the society, the more different the men and women become.
But I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
I know everyone's shocked when they hear this. This isn't shocking news. People have known this in the scientific community for at least 25 years. On average, men are more interested in.
So, I'm not sure why he's comparing the two together, especially since Harrison's speech, he's like, well, I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there thinking about your titles and your promotions. How does he know that that's what they're thinking? Some of them are thinking about, oh my God, I got to get the highest paying job possible to pay off these loans. Promotions will come later. I mean, if I'm going to jump into the heads of people, of college students, recent graduates, and assume what their thoughts are, I think high up on that is going to be that if they finance their own education, if their parents paid for it, then maybe they're not worried about that. Is that Pastor Chris Pine? Yeah, he shaved Chris Pine's head. He could get that, yeah. Except that guy dresses more like me than Chris Pine currently, who kind of dresses like he might be like a cross between like lumberjack truck driver and some kind of sex cult leader, which all three looks I admire. Good afternoon, everyone, except Jefferson Spatchcock. He's an a-hole. And look at the hat. Yeah, it's an a-hole move. This is true. He was a horrible roommate. I mean, by all accounts, sure. Okay, so just to put this little bit into perspective here, there is an article, and I'll remove this and I'll share a different one here. Let's see. I don't know that this is going to really please everyone. It's an older article from 2020. And it is from, of all places, BuzzFeed News, which I think was sort of shuttered. Or maybe it's just been converted into some kind of AI, post-bot kind of thing. But in this, it says a controversial study claimed to explain why women don't go into science and tech. It just got a 1,113 word correction. Jordan Peterson cited the study to argue women naturally aren't interested in technical fields, but it presented a contrived and distorted picture, said an outside researcher. And so if you're interested, you can go through this entire thing. I don't know what's going on with Avril Lavigne. And it lays out some pretty interesting points. One of them that I thought was interesting was that where was that number? They had goofed up some of the numbers. People had a hard time even trying to reproduce what they had. After Richardson and her colleagues recalculated each country's figures, they found that overall the study underestimated the number of women STEM graduates worldwide by about 8%. So, and then that wasn't the only problem. Even after Richardson's teams learned about the study authors' method of calculating a ratio, they still couldn't replicate all of their results. So, not great. Cultural patterns around women's achievement in and preferences for STEM are incredibly complex and incredibly diverse across the globe. So, doesn't sound like it's as simple as Jordan Peterson is saying, which, surprise. So that just seems kind of boneheaded. I think PineCreek is just accepting that, Jordan Peterson must be right about this, but he's citing a study that was problematic, and he's citing it to kind of further. There are studies on this where they show that in some places, I think there's been like four or five maybe, but I don't know how well they've been reproduced, and I don't know to what extent. Like that was one of the bigger ones, talking about essentially that if you have a society that's very equal and every men and women have, more equality, women are going to gravitate towards women kind of studies, like the arts and the fluffy stuff, and guys are going to get into the under the hood and light a rocket, build a fire, STEM stuff. and apparently that's not quite accurate. And it sounds like it's a vast oversimplification, which I expect from guys like Jordan Peterson, but I don't think Doug got the memo on that. So I'm going to drop that off. Then he did this one, and this one's probably going to be a little bit more touchy. So I am going to share this particular screen here. This one makes very little sense to me, and I'm very interested to hear what people in the chat are going to say about this. So I'm not going to set this up in any way. I'm just going to play this, and I'm really interested in hearing, just your first reactions in the live chat as soon as you see the thing in its entirety. So let's play it.
Okay, surprise! I'm in Peru, and I'm at Machu Picchu. Isn't this just so beautiful? I'm here by myself. I've seen a lot of llamas, and the people here are so kind. I feel very safe here. It's a little sad that I had to leave my country to feel safe, but that will get better eventually. And I am dying for some Trader Joe's rolled chili lime chips, but okay, surprise.
So, for those who didn't know, that is Dylan Mulvaney, who's a trans activist, and the title for this under the description from Doug is woke. Trans activists can't have it both ways. Spliced onto the top of here is Peru protesters slam new insurance law that deems transgender people mentally ill. And then when you watch this video and you get to the
I'm
point,
in Peru, and I'm at Machu Picchu. Isn't this just so beautiful? I'm here by myself. I've seen a lot of llamas, and the people here are so kind. I feel very safe here.
Machu
It's a
Picchu's
little
supposed to be
sad
great.
that I had to leave my country to feel safe, but that will get better eventually. And I am dying for some Trader Joe's rolled chili lime chips, but
This, if you're not mentally ill, why do you need health insurance? This, okay, and the snippet at the top of the beginning is from a Reuters article. So now that we've seen that, keep that in mind. We'll remove this and we'll share the article where this came from. Let's see here. Share the screen out. Okay. I'm going to shrink myself down so that's more readable. Peru protesters slam new insurance law that deems transgender people mentally ill. If you read this, hundreds of protesters in Peru's capital marched on Friday to demand the scrapping of a new law that describes transgender people, among others, as having a mental illness so they can access health benefits. Around 500 demonstrators peacefully walked the streets of downtown Lima, hoisting banners and slogans that read, "No more stigmas" and "My identity is not a disease." The law, which was approved administratively last week by a government of President Dina Boluarte, specifies that those who identify as transgender, along with quote-unquote cross-dressers and, quote, others with gender identity disorders, are considered to be diagnosed with illnesses that are eligible for mental health services via both public and private providers. The protesters reached the health ministry offices, but no clashes were reported. Gender identities are no longer considered pathologies, said activist Gahela Kari Contreras, who accused Boluarte's government of trying to trample on the LGBTQ plus community's rights. We're not going to let them, quote unquote. That goes into talking about what this is and what the people are trying to do about it. This doesn't really. Let's see, what is that? Critics of the law have argued that the update of the country's PES health regulations was unnecessary since existing rules already allowed for universal access to mental health services. So I don't think that this issue is quite what Doug is saying it is. Like, and I don't understand why. Like, the idea that he's doing here is such a lame idea. Like, okay, so if you're a trans person and you're not mentally, you can be trans and and have mental health issues. The issue is that being trans is not the mental health issue. The fact that PineCreek is still trafficking in this kind of rhetoric is absolutely fucking disgusting. It is. It's stupid. He's been told this multiple times. He knows better. And now he's sort of making this pointless non sequitur kind of connection. I mean, I was actually kind of waiting to, well, if the Peruvian protesters are slamming this insurance law, and Dylan Mulvaney is down in Machu Picchu talking about how great it is and how kind the people are, and she actually feels safe there. I was kind of expecting Doug to do that. Well, what a hypocrite. look at this hypocrite, Dylan Mulvaney. He's down there loving it. Why isn't he standing in, why isn't he standing in solidarity with the Peruvian protesters? I kind of expected that angle to come from him, but instead it was this, well, if you don't have mental illness, why do you need health care? Like they already have health care, Bubba. They already have it. they're talking about the government trying to classify trans identities, gender identity issues as pathologies in the law, and they don't need to do it. So, yeah. Let's see. My wife isn't cucking me. Why does she sleep in a different bed from me every night? Let's see. Oh, Simus is here. Good to see you, Simus. Yeah, if you don't have cancer, why do you need health care? Exactly. Yeah, like I don't. It's just such a goofy holding on sequitur, Batman. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I think I can tick off a group of minorities out there today, who might take, I'm going to take this out of context so that I can guarantee their reactions will be out of context, and then I can point and laugh and claim that they're triggered. Like, Doug is just practicing being a troll, and not a good one. This isn't good trolling. He needs to try harder. So with that being said, let's drop that out, and let's move on to the next bit here, I think. Let's see. I think I'd had it up in the videos before. Where was he at? No, his videos. Sorry, his videos were the last few videos that he made were excerpts of his conversation with me. I think it was this one from a day ago. Let me get back into this. Let's see. Nope. Here he is talking about Carville. Did a short about James Carville, whining about like how Carville's message isn't getting through to people about Trump. Like Carville's message isn't getting through to a lot of people because Carville's been kind of irrelevant, at least to sort of more energized left-wing base of Democratic movements for a while. So I think it's safe to call him like a blue dog Democrat. Let's embiggen this. We can get rid of that. Okay. If you're not eating at the time, why do you keep cutlery? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. As far as women in science goes, my wife is a clinical hematologist and my daughter is finishing up here a master's in epidemiology. Epidemiology is fascinating. I mean, hematology is too, but epidemiology is really interesting. I was always, really interested in doing that, but did not get into the sciences. Okay, let's jump into this here. Let me.
Men, African black men, African American black men, I should say, who support Trump is like, it's going sky high. And they maybe it's because they feel like Trump is like one of them now, falsely accused, mistreated.
How is he mistreated? He's able to use the legal system in a way that the bottom 90% of the population will never have access to, in terms of continuances, appeals, filings, legal teams.
I mean, it's
most people want somebody that I was actually reading at Trump's current, the document fraud thing with regards to the payoff, him essentially, I mean, it was one thing that he paid somebody for their silence. That's one thing, but he hid the payment so that it didn't look like it was, they were doing this to kind of like hide this from the voters or whatever. And because of the way they filed these documents, they could have just paid them for their silence directly and said, yeah, that's it. But the way they ended up doing this administratively, it's sort of like the cover up is worse than the crime. There wasn't a crime, but they covered it up anyway as if it was a crime, and that cover up is in fact a crime because of the way they fraudulently filed it and prepped the documents for it. It's just fascinating incompetence. But it's like you accidentally robbed a bank, and now you're trying to tell, no, I had money. I had plenty of money. Why would I rob a bank? Yeah, exactly. But you did. It's weird, but you did it. And well, I'm not guilty of robbing it. Yeah, but you did do it. We've got documentation that says you did. And your excuse is like, well, it's not a, it's not the best analogy, but in this particular case, if Doug is trying to say like, oh, well, people are starting to relate to Trump because he's an outlaw and now he's an enemy of the system. That rhetoric has been around since 2015. There were people talking about that when he was doing the whole when he was airing out his nonsense about Obama not being from here. The whole birth certificate crap. And people are like, oh, they just don't want to listen to him because he's not part of the system. And it's like he's a nominally wealthy individual who was a reality TV show host for a decade on an NBC show. And he endangered his position on that really cushy job by going out and doing that politically. And then that was essentially the launch point for his political career, at least, national political career as a presidential candidate and president. And he's still kind of doing the same thing. So I think it's interesting to say like, oh, well, maybe these people are kind of like siding with him at this point. It's like he started off his political career at a nationwide level by being a racist, by being open. Like he's not questioning other candidates about their birth certificate. Just Obama. He just decided to, dip his toes in that racist water for a little bit, and then found a following that was eager. And they were eagerly looking for a big name celebrity to attach that crap to, and there it was. And people thought that he had some kind of credibility because he'd been on primetime TV for a decade. Even though before that, usually if you saw him on TV, you'd see him on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, that cringy 80s show that was wealth porn. And he was just he was a punchline on that thing. So
Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot with how what they should have done is just ignored him.
The Democrats as a political campaign are not doing this. So Doug is clearly watching stuff. So most of the stuff that's going on here, like Doug watches stuff that feeds into the narrative that the Democrats as a concerted effort are suing Donald Trump and using the justice system to prosecute, to do to bring these charges against him. The only problem with that is that they as a political party cannot do that. They can't. They're just a political party. Can they influence? Can they extol? Can they send people in to recommend or doing it? Can they provide like legal arguments outside the system? Yeah. And if they do, and law enforcement officers and law enforcement agents and prosecuting attorneys realize, well, somebody made a pretty good point and it is out there. And now that we know about it, we need to do something about it. Otherwise, if you hear about a crime, know about a crime, and can prosecute that crime, and you don't take steps to look into it and investigate it, that's kind of a dereliction of duty. So the crimes being pushed here, like Jack Smith stuff, is coming directly from the Department of Justice, but Biden is not suing him or pressing charges against him. The Department of Justice has a special prosecutor that's assigned to bring this case because they believe they have evidence that he engaged in these crimes. And the point of accusing him of those things and then giving him an opportunity to go to court is so that he get, the government has to present their case. The burden's on them to show that they are aware and they have evidence that Trump did in fact commit these crimes. And Trump has the ability and the right to defend himself. Usually prosecutors are not going to prosecute a case they think they're going to lose. So the idea, if you believe this kind of thing, that they're throwing these kinds of long balls at the situation, most of the cases that have gone against Trump have been pretty conservative. The documents case, pretty conservative. The slander case against E. Jean Carroll, that was a civil case, so that wasn't done by the Dems. That was one citizen, E. Jean Carroll, suing Donald Trump. That's not the Democrats. That didn't have to be coordinated by them. She was already in the works doing that. It was delayed because he was president for a while, I believe. And then she ended up suing him again and getting even more damages out of him. So Doug is in some bad, he's getting a lot of bad intel on how this stuff works. Like, oh, this is just, the Democrats have brought these cases against them. Trump says that. Trump's wrong. Right. That the narrative is that they're doing that to him because he's their political enemy, and he needs to project that because he's promising his voters and supporters that he will do exactly the same thing to his political enemies if he gets a term, he gets voted in again. So it's pretty insane, right? Like, they're corrupt for what they're doing. Vote for me and I'll do it back to them, but I won't be corrupt. Follow that logic.
But they're so angry at him for some reason. He triggers in them some fears, irrational fears that they just can't ignore.
In the Democrats, the irrational fears would be, we saw him attempt an auto coup, or at least his fervent followers attempted an auto coup. I don't know how many people were really all that concerned about it as it was happening, because I just thought it was a gathering that got a little out of control. It wasn't until later on they started getting into it and they found out the level of coordination that was going on kind of behind the scenes with some of the pro-Trump groups. And then it started getting, then my eyebrows started going up. I'm like, okay, this is bad. I mean, there was obviously the physical harm that happened to some people while they were there, and it was scary and it was frightening. And you have people running out. What I think he's talking about here is like, well, these people are just, they're unnecessary, they're just irrationally afraid. Is he irrationally afraid of being shot? Because regardless of what side you were on, a woman running under a lot of operating under the internalized rhetoric of Donald Trump and his fans and followers decided that what she needed to do was jump a barrier despite orders she was getting from security and social and Secret Service, mostly White House security, and they shot her. And she died as a result of that injury. I would think that situation is one that you should be fearful of when people get themselves into that situation. That's not an irrational fear. Someone was shot to death as a result of what they thought they were doing was right, even though they were, up their own ass with a bunch of crazy Trump rhetoric about how they needed to get Pence to do something unconstitutional and illegal or else. So Doug, the idea that Doug's like, look, if this guy gets in and he's not going to do anything to you, what Donald Trump's stuff did to us as a country, it happened to all of us. The idea that a president is just not going to accept the results of an election, not going to peacefully turn that over, spread lies about the election process, even though he's counting on it this time, that affects everybody. Right, it coarsens the entire thing. He might as well not even be talking about voting. And I can almost guarantee you that if he does get voted in, he's going to stop talking about voting. I mean, he'll be talking about voting as if it's unnecessary, because I think he's going to make some real major plays, because he gets in for this next term. He's not going to have anything to lose. Well, he's got everything to lose and everything to gain if he can twist things even more. So it would be bad. Doug just thinks it's not going to be bad for him because he's a white former Mennonite from Canada. What are they going to do to him? Right? He doesn't have to worry. He's not the woke. They're not coming after him. And Doug was probably going to cast his vote based on that, which is corrupt. That's the best word for it. Doug is corrupted. Thanks for that, Simus. Stephanie's, let's deport the Canadians. Yeah. I mean, it's a real problem. There's just all these people here living here illegally. Pat, thanks for the super chat. Shirtless Spatchcock, shake that moneymaker. Not for 2, maybe 20. Don't do that though. Do not spend $20 on this. I will not take my shirt off. I already did that. I already did it. It was an internet classic. Hopefully it's buried somewhere. All right, let's get back into this.
Okay, here's Bill Maher.
Bree makes a good point. White Mennonite. Is there any other kind? Excellent point. It may have been needlessly redundant for me to even say white Mennonite, just former Mennonite from Canada. Good to see you, Bree.
The Stormy Daniels case.
For years to put Trump on trial, and it is all just going away. They blew it.
It isn't. I don't know what he's talking about yet. Bill Maher is talking like these court cases don't take a lot of time, and they take even longer if you're dealing with a perpetrator, a culprit who is well financed. It's the justice system takes time. It runs on money, and if you've got a lot of money or at least a lot of resources, otherwise, other people willing to fund your defense, it will take a while. And he's just, oh, it's just going up in smoke. No, it just keeps getting delayed. The point of these is to get delayed until he gets in. That's the whole point. The interesting thing will be like if Trump doesn't win, if Biden wins a second term, and that's it, right? There's no point in delaying these at that point, right? It'll be to appeal them or get them overturned or something else. It's not going to matter anymore. They're not going to be able to play for time. When that happens, I wonder to what extent these guys will cover the legal situation with this same rhetoric, because he's acting like Maher is kind of feeding into the exact same thing. Well, the Democrats have had all these chances to send him to court. I'm like, the Dems can't do that, right? Law enforcement has to do that. Like those are being brought by attorneys general in states and at the federal level, right? If they're trying to say that Biden is suing Trump and he's using the government to go after him, that's not how the system works. If you think that's how the system works, you are buying into a disempowering narrative that is implying that when it comes to November 2nd, when it's time to vote, hopefully you take the advantage to vote early. The idea is that you're just voting for one of two authoritarian dictators, and you need to vote for the one that's going to go after the people you hate and not come after you. It's us versus them, right? Both sides are corrupt. Both sides do these horrible things. What you want is the one that's going to use that corrupt power to make America great again, and vote against the dictator who wants to make you, a woke LGBTQ communist, which is what I guess is the only variety they know of, right? So this is a real, that rhetoric is by design disempowering. It's designed to shut off critical thought and feed into a disempowered cynicism where people are just like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to vote for the one that I want to have a beer with, even though he's corrupt as fuck.
Would at every term. It's Stormy or bust. If this one doesn't work, and she's a bad witness, but you say it's not a Me Too case.
It is not a Me Too case. I mean, I wasn't assaulted. I wasn't attacked or raped or coerced or blackmailed. They tried to shove me in the Me.
By the way, what's her name? E. Jean Carroll. She said something similar, that Trump didn't rape her. Because
No, I don't think that's what she said. And technically, according to New York law, he was found liable for sexual assault because in New York law, rape is it has a different legal definition. It has to involve the male genitalia doing the work.
rape is sexy. That's what she said.
No, she said I think she said that it was used that way, that the media made it like that. So Doug's not exactly getting that right either, but starting to see a trend here of Doug's media literacy being Mennonite-like.
Toolbox to further their own agenda. And first of all, I didn't want any part of that because it's not the truth, and I'm not a victim in that regard.
That's not what she's saying now. She's talking.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what her testimony in the current case. It doesn't matter how salacious it gets. Her testimony in this case is to establish that they in fact they in fact met and had a fling, that there was a relationship that Trump wanted covered up. He didn't want her talking about it. They even said in the court proceedings they didn't want a lot of salacious detail. The judge was wondering why Trump's defense lawyers didn't object enough to prosecution asking Stormy Daniels some of the questions they were asking, because it was basically pointless. She was getting into like the details of their meeting and how she felt about his demeanor and the things that he said and how she felt about that. None of that was particularly relevant. And even the judge was just like, you had a lot of opportunities here to object and you didn't take advantage of them. I don't know what this is about. But it got it on the record. But it really doesn't matter. Her testimony is just to establish that they had a fling, and that fling was something that Trump did not want her talking about, and he paid her money to not talk about it. That in and of itself was not a crime. He acted as he seemed to think there was something wrong with it, that it was a crime, and that he needed to cover it up. And in the covering it up, he committed misdemeanors, and then didn't seem to realize that those particular those kinds of fraudulent misdemeanors can become felonies if you are covering up payments for the purposes of shielding information in elections, something like that, but basically hiding it for the purposes of from potential voters. So yeah, that's a pretty technical case, and it's mostly based on the paperwork that's involved. It's not going to be decided by Stormy. I think Stormy had a little bit. She had a little bit of an axe to grind there, and she did it. And from all accounts, she did it well. But this is a rabbit hole that these guys are going down. And Maher's treating it like, well, if this is an example of where the case is going, then the Democrats are doomed, because their Democrat plans of getting him on this just aren't working. This isn't their plan. That's not the prosecutor's plan. The Democrats aren't guiding the prosecution. The prosecutor is, and their plan of prosecuting the case is the paperwork, not Daniel's testimony. Maher needs to shut the hell up about this and get a clue. Doug needs to read more.
Talking about he was bigger and blocking the way. It's all the Me Too buzzwords. She said there was a.
What does it mean to be Mennonite like? I'm just like, I mean, I think Mennonites are allowed their own TV, but I'm just thinking like he watches this stuff and then just jumps to the most superficial conclusion based on what the TV provided. Or draw some really odd, some of those like video clips that I just showed, these odd non sequiturs. So I apologize to any Mennonites who may be watching. And I'd also ask, if you are watching this, are you allowed to, if you're a Mennonite? I mean, I know you guys can you can drive cars and have TVs and stuff. Are you allowed on social media? Serious question.
It's a power imbalance of power for sure. My hands were shaking so hard. She said she blacked out. Blacked out? She's a porn star. The Democrats have.
I don't understand what that means. Like, she's a porn star, so of course she can take more abuse than an average person. Like, more abuse? Like, her interactions with people are based on contracts. You go into like somebody made a pretty good point about this. I can't remember who it was, but they were saying, okay, yeah, she gets into a situation where a wealthy, powerful guy, nominally, wants to meet her for dinner, and then they meet in his hotel room, and then he's coming on to her pretty hard. It's obvious that he wants to have sex. Because she's a porn star, she can't be concerned or creeped out by this. Like, those are plots to movies that she might have done. Those are not the circumstances under which she normally works. I don't think that these guys understand. Like, I think they're confusing the type of entertainment she does with the way she makes it. Michael Deaton says every indictment against Trump was brought by a grand jury. Exactly. In some cases, more than one grand jury, including Jack Smith's indictments. Yeah, but they don't care about that because that gives context. And they're just going to be like, no, the Democrats magically made these court cases appear. That the Democrats dialed up a prosecutor and made a grand jury happen and rule their way. Like, what kind of fantasy world are you living in? Like, just get a clue.
Had 4 years to put Trump on trial, and it is all just going away.
Yeah, this is terrifying news for some Democrats.
It really isn't, because it's not the news. It's a complete tangent. It's completely out of whack with what's actually going on with the case. So a grand jury of Donald's peers felt that the evidence of his criminality, which we all see every day on television, was great enough to warrant indictments. Yeah. And also, not only that, they're seeing more evidence in a grand jury. They're getting a pick. I mean, because the purpose of a prosecuting attorney with a grand jury is to lay out, hey, this is what we've got. This is what we think happened. These are the steps that were taken that involve this criminal process. And these are the kinds of evidence, the types of evidence that we have that we're going to show you to back up the claims that we're making and the narrative that we're, the narrative that we've found here. I don't mean narrative as a narrative we've constructed, but like we've assembled a timeline of the actions that have happened, and these are the points of evidence, pieces of evidence that back those up. And those grand juries were like, yeah, it looks good, tracks, indict them. And they did. There was a politician in Poland many years ago who said, how can you rape a prostitute? Jesus, that's monstrous. Yeah. I mean, there's Republican, conservative politicians like that here. I shouldn't say Republican because there's probably conservative Democrats that would say something that tone deaf and factually incorrect.
I mean, it's just obvious he's a criminal. I mean, Robert De Niro said that there's no redeeming qualities in Trump to even play him as a character.
Well, that's De Niro's, personal opinion. So, but I guess that when De Niro says that, he's speaking for the entire Democratic Party. Is that what Doug thinks? Roden says, jail just wrapped up, so you may get a few new people popping in soon. Yeah, I timed this one for 3:00 because he'd been on for several hours. And I know Amy Newman was kind of simulcasting it too because she jumped into co-host with him. I missed his invitation to co-host this morning, which kind of bugged me because I was going to come straight back here earlier, but I ended up lingering over at my folks' place out of town. And so I wouldn't have been able to jump on. And I was like, I kind of regret that. But Digital Gnosis was live too. And I kind of timed this at 3 because I thought, given how long they'd already been on, maybe they'd be wrapping up pretty quick. But yeah, they did a big show. Let's see. Titan is here. Good to see you, Titan. Is De Niro an atheist deacon? Yeah, he speaks for us all, Doug. He speaks for us all.
I mean, so apparently the Stormy Daniel case has to do with, what is it? Either election interference or
I was practically hollering this in the live chat while this was on, just like business documents fraud in service of a conspiracy to commit election fraud
or campaign finance. The money wasn't funneled the right way. To me, even all that's stupid because here you got Trump, who is a billionaire, barely. My guess is if he does have $1 billion of net worth, it's just barely. And it's like he funds a lot of his own. He gets money, of course, but it's sort of like the difference between federal income tax and social security. After a while, it's one big fund. And
no, that's not really how it works. I'm going to learn to make wedding cakes for a side job where I only make wedding cakes for LGBTQ just to see if Republicans will come after me for discrimination. I mean, you could try. Hey, good to see you, Jalen. You put in a marathon today, man. That was a long show. I caught bits and pieces of it. I'm sorry I didn't get to catch more of it, and I missed your invite to co-host. DeFreak is here. Good to see you. Trump isn't a fucking millionaire, Doug. I mean, yeah, I think he plays one on TV.
And then you got just, but this money was meant for that, and that money is meant for this.
It's almost as if accountability and being a look. This is a guy that's running as he is the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party, and the Republican Party used to stand for stewardship, right? Sensible, conservative, economic and financial stewardship. They know business and they know money. And yet they get into a situation like this where they didn't know how to handle the money and they didn't know how to qualify it and they didn't know how to talk about it. In fact, in this particular case, Trump was erring on the side that what he was trying to do with these people wasn't a crime. It was a crime, right? Because it wasn't until later they're like, why you can, if you are offering them money and asking them to sign an NDA where they won't talk about your trysts, you can do that. What you can't do is what you did by having other people funnel the money around so it looks like a business expense. So you can kind of hide it from campaign disclosures and stuff like that. That's the part that was kind of screwed up. That's the illegal part. And they would have known that had he gone to like some decent political representation, but they didn't. He was surrounded by yes people and some incompetence, and they, for some reason, defaulted to, lockdown crisis mode when these stories started coming out, like the Access Hollywood one where they grab him by the what, and then these things were coming out. And he's like, oh, I'm going to get crucified when it comes time to get to vote. No women are going to vote for me after this, and then. Cooler heads obviously didn't prevail because they could have told him, like, the situation with you and Karen McDougal and you and Stormy Daniels, if you paid them money, you don't need to like hide that kind of stuff. And they went and did it anyway. So, and Doug here is now providing cover for this kind of political activity. Like, well, it's complicated and they've got their forms and it all just goes into one big bucket anyway. Like, okay, but if this kind of thing was done by AOC, and this is my question for Doug, would Doug allow someone like AOC off the hook for something similar? Because I'm pretty sure he would be much more inclined or much more curious to get into the details of what she did, how she did it, what makes it illegal, and what maybe doesn't. I think he would be a lot more nuanced and a little bit more nitpicky about that if it was her. And with Trump, I'm just hearing him like, well, government's hard and business can be hard and documents can be confusing. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. This guy's running as the head of the Republican Party, or they're supposed to be, they're supposed to be the wizards of money. And he can't figure out how to do this stuff. This guy says he's around the best people, and they literally humped their way into a series of 36 felony charges, or 34 felony charges.
Just is a mess. Okay, one more. Why misinformation must...
This is good because now we're going to get into COVID, and this is a little bit more interesting. Let's see here. JL says, we had some good chats, some not so good. Jimob was in my live chat, or Rimjob, I think is as he's called. Tangelo came on stage, had a couple precepts, blah. Oh, Tangelo. Yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if he shows up a little bit. Jimob claimed in my live chat that human eyes are universals. Huh. Has Jimob talked to a guy that we all know and love named Darth Dawkins? Darth Dawkins might be able to set him straight on that. Those eyes are contingent, my friend. They're contingent upon God.
Be allowed. Oh yeah, this I found very interesting.
Drugs for animals and horse
and people telling them to. You talk about cancel culture and who to shame. Ivermectin, a dewormer.
Get into the ivermectin thing. Biden is not immune from this kind of criticism either. I mean, and not only that, but this document thing was something that happened with, I think, Obama. I think it happened with George W. Bush. And it's happened with other politicians too, where they leave office after a while. They end up having some kind of classified material that they probably shouldn't have on them. So it should probably be looked at a little bit more. But the number of documents that Trump had, and the fact that the entire thing could have been avoided when the National Archive contacts you and says, hey, you got stuff that you probably shouldn't, we would like them back. And he ghosted them for 6 months or something like that. He's like, yeah, I'm not giving them back. I want them. And they're like, look, we need those back. And if you don't give them back, we're going to send law enforcement to confiscate them because they do not belong to you. They belong to us. And then they did that, and that was evidence that they were being mean to him. For how many people? And just to go back to Doug's point, if any of you out there, people of color, anybody in a minority, or just anybody who's like working class, or even kind of like middle class, like I think I'm middle class based on the money that I make. Maybe even I might even be considered upper middle class. Don't let the apartment closet doors fool you. How many of us could have documents that you need a SCIF to access, which is a top secret, like basically like imagine a Faraday cage, that in order to open it, to prevent any kind of illicit surveillance. And you're just like, no, I'd rather not give them back. I mean, he treated these things like they were overdue library books. How many normal people would have been allowed that amount of leeway? They contacted him multiple times, and they let him slow roll them over handing those documents over until they finally are like, look, enough's enough. He dodged subpoenas that they sent. Finally, they're like, we're coming to get your documents. And then he was, oh my God, continue. But they showed up at my house and they took the things that were mine. It's like, no, we documented many times that those weren't your things and that we need you to send them back. You didn't. So we got them. Yeah, just snowflake behavior, absolute, insanity. But so here is this is Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo kind of reacting incredulously to people doing things like taking ivermectin during the pandemic.
Really?
They are shaming themselves. No one has to shame them.
I am taking a what do they call it? Like a regular dose, whatever. They're trying to build up of ivermectin. Ivermectin was a boogeyman early on in COVID.
You couldn't talk about it.
That was
you could.
Wrong. We were given bad information about ivermectin. The real question is,
what was the bad
why?
information?
Everyone's going to say,
what was their motive for giving you what bad information did you get? And then what motive do you think they had for giving said bad information?
Money. Joe Rogan was right.
Oh, he knows. There's no money in ivermectin. And there was when ivermectin was getting bandied around there. I think ivermectin was getting talked about as a potential treatment. Cure, I don't think was ever used by anybody, but the concern was whether or not ivermectin could be used to help mitigate symptoms, treat the symptoms, right, to prevent death. It didn't do that. It didn't help. What you ended up having was a run of people running out and getting ivermectin, even getting it from vet supplies, which are going to be in dosages that are not safe for human consumption because it's based on body weight. It's a dewormer. It's an antiparasitic. And there were people that were goofy enough to take it in those dosages that were set for equine medicine. You don't need that if you're a 150 to 250 pound human being. Also, ivermectin is good medication for antiparasitic, for treating parasitic infections and deworming living things. And it's a good idea to have those available for when those infections happen. Because it's not like the only thing we have to worry about was getting infected by COVID. Having an entire population run out, panic, and start hoarding an otherwise readily available medication when it's not going to do you any good, and it's not going to be available for people to use to treat themselves for parasitic infections or treat their animals for parasitic infections, is a dumb thing to happen. So the information went out, don't worry about it. Ivermectin ain't working. It's not treating symptoms. It doesn't prevent you from getting COVID, and it doesn't cure it. There's no reason for you to even bother putting it in your system. And if you put too much of it in your system, you can experience some significant side effects. Don't bother. Whatever he's talking about here, and whatever he's talking like, well, it's all about the money. The only reason that you would prevent somebody, if there's a money element involved in it, you prevent them from getting ivermectin so that you can sell them something more expensive. We had nothing more expensive at the time. There isn't anything. And ivermectin still doesn't work. Even a vaccine, which most of us got because the government paid for it, mine were all free. That was a boon to the companies that made it, but that was because Trump put in Operation Warp Speed and we wanted a vaccine really quickly. That helps prevention and spread. It doesn't treat the symptoms. We never really got, we got the monoclonal thing, monoclonal antibodies, I think. Eventually we got those because Trump got treated with them when he got sick. And those were limited, and those do treat the symptoms, and they reduce the duration that you've got the virus. I know, because a relative of mine got COVID, and he, upon getting tested, was able to get those monoclonal antibodies, got the treatment for it, and he started improving within 24 hours. I don't think ivermectin would have worked that well because it doesn't work at all. And actually, Bree has a link here for anybody interested. COVID-19 treatment guidelines.nih.gov, therapies, miscellaneous drugs, ivermectin. Take a look at that. Double up. I'm out by douching disinfectants. Ivermectin has no effect on COVID. It will help with scabies. Yes. It's very good for things like that. If you have intestinal parasites, it will take care of those. Ivermectin is very good at dealing with parasitic infections. That's like the number one choice. And you don't want people like they did the same thing with hydrochloride. I'm thinking hydrochlorothiazide. That's a blood pressure medication. Hydroxychloroquine. That was getting harder for people to get who needed those immune suppressants for autoimmune disorders. And they were having a harder time getting it because people were trying to hoard it because they were also running on, well, if you just take that, it'll keep you from getting it because they believe that was true. And it took a ton of public education efforts. Like, no, it didn't work that way. Don't take it if you don't need it. They kept doing it.
No, Joe Rogan was saying, yeah, he was right. But that's not what
No,
matters.
it wasn't.
What matters is the entire clinical community knew that ivermectin couldn't hurt you.
None of them. The entire medical community acknowledged that if you take too much ivermectin, it can in fact hurt you. And the concern was you had people going out and hoarding it so much, if they couldn't get human medical grade ivermectin, they would settle for equine grade ones, which are in dosages much higher than a human would ever need. And the concern was they're taking this stuff without any medical guidance. In fact, with medical guidance going in the contrary, you don't need it. You certainly don't need it in dosages that high. And people decided that that's what they were going to do anyway. And they're like, don't do this. Don't go hoarding ivermectin. And for people who are like, well, you know what? Actually, I think he said it in his live chat in response to me. Well, it's cheap. Actually, we might see.
They knew it, Patrick. I know they knew it. How do I know? Because now I'm doing nothing but talking to these clinicians.
Injecting drugs for animals.
Yeah. So here we had a case that a few years ago, society, you weren't given permission from society to admit publicly that you're taking ivermectin or that you were thinking of taking ivermectin.
If you were admitting, if you, well, you know what, I'm bold enough to come out and brave enough to come out and say that I'm taking an anti-parasitic because I don't want to get this virus. And then they got that virus. Did it help with my symptoms? Maybe. And none of them seem to even understand the power of placebo effect either. So, because that's something you have to factor into.
And this is for horses. This is a dewormer. When there are,
that wasn't doctors saying that. It is a dewormer. That is what it is. But it's suitable for horses and humans, but not in the same doses. An equine, and I don't think that equine grade ivermectin would be held to the same quality control standards as ivermectin given to humans, but I might be wrong about that. It just depends. Maybe there is no difference. But the doctors weren't saying this. Media was going out and saying this, and talk show hosts were making jokes about this because the easiest thing to joke about was to joke about somebody like Joe Rogan confidently proclaiming that if he takes a horse dewormer, he's going to be fine. He's going to make it through and he doesn't understand why any of these other dopes aren't taking a maintenance dose of a dewormer, right? The fact that they called it a horse dewormer was just, kind of a comedic non sequitur. I mean, it is a horse dewormer, but it doesn't just deworm horses.
There are many studies out there that say that ivermectin does indeed help some people.
It does not. The only study that I've been able to find, well, I'm going to let him play this out, but Stephanie says hay is for horses. Surprised a hay diet wasn't recommended. If you don't have, you don't have worms either. If you don't have worms, what do you need healthcare for? I use ivermectin. I also don't have COVID. Coincidence? Yeah, it's like, I bought a pet goldfish and I never got COVID. Goldfish protect against COVID.
And plus the downside, the risks of ivermectin is close to zero, especially if prescribed by a doctor, which a lot of doctors even several years ago did. So what's the problem?
Okay. There's plenty of problems.
Here's a pill.
You don't want the population running around thinking that they can take maintenance dosages of a treatment That's not going to work. You're using a supply of medication that can be directed towards better usages, parasitic infections, let's say, scabies, other things like this, and just taking it because, hey, what can it hurt? And maybe it works. No, that's not, you don't want to do medicine that way, especially during a pandemic when you're shutting down production of stuff, which I think is going to be a point that he makes here. Like, oh, it's cheap to make and it's easy. Like, so is hand sanitizer and toilet paper, and we ran out of both.
Here's a liquid. May not help you, but it's definitely not going to hurt you, but it may actually help you. Oh, no, this is for horses. And if you said anything that ivermectin could help you and you posted on Twitter 4 years ago, it was most likely taken down as misinformation. See, the problem with taking down things for misinformation is it might not be misinformation. It might be the truth. And just people at the time think it's misinformation.
It was misinformation even then. People were trying to say that there were kind of three goofy claims going on around it, or hopeful claims. One, taking an antiparasitic might make you less susceptible to contracting the coronavirus that causes COVID. Two, even if it doesn't, it might help treat and help mitigate and shorten the length of the virus and treat the symptoms so that you don't develop the pneumonia that leads to you having to be intubated in a hospital. Three, it cures it. It's a cure for it. So a preventative treatment or cure. It isn't any of those three. Doug doesn't sound like Doug is claiming that they are. Doug is kind of going, well, what could it hurt? Well, that's not why you take it. Like you could take a maintenance dose right now of an antibiotic, and maybe you've got like a low grade infection going on. Maybe you have nothing. You could take, let's say a 10-day run of antibiotics. Is it going to harm you? Probably not. Was it necessary? Absolutely not. That's the point. The problem wasn't like, well, is it probably going to hurt them? No, probably it won't. Is it necessary to have a larger group of people think that this is going to be something that's going to protect them and go around consuming this drug for no good reason? It's not necessary. That was what was coming from medical professionals. This is not necessary because it's not a good treatment. It's not a cure. It's not going to mitigate the symptoms. The best research that I found on this has shown that ivermectin might help individuals dealing with long COVID symptoms. It might shorten them or help reduce the severity of them in certain cases. But the evidence for that is not great. Not as far as I can tell, it's also not very reproducible, and they don't know how many other factors are going along with that. What they do know is that for individuals who were taking it when they were acutely sick with COVID, it didn't shrink the duration that they were sick. It didn't reduce the severity of symptoms. They contracted it. It didn't reduce that. They did work this out. In fact, ivermectin wasn't the only antiparasitic that they were talking about. They were playing with all sorts of different drugs and wondering if it was going to help with the treatment of this. And then what would end up happening, I don't know if anybody remembers this, it would get announced that, okay, so medical scientists are looking into ivermectin, some autoimmune suppressants, and then other stuff, immune suppressants and these other kinds of drugs to see if they'll help with treatment. Because really what you want to do is people are going to get it's a novel virus. People are going to get it. You want to make sure that if they get it, they don't die from it. So what you really wanted was a treatment to deal with the symptoms, to keep people alive so their body could fight it off. And they would announce that they were looking at drugs A, B, and C. And then you'd have people be like, ooh, well, how do I get drugs A, B, and C? And one of those drugs was ivermectin. And for some strange reason, it's still going around, because when you had media personalities jokingly and derisively refer to it as horse wormers, a bunch of chip on their shoulder, spiteful, ignorant freaks took that as indication that they were on the right path, because liberal media personalities stuck their noses up as far as they were concerned. And so they'll be damned if they're going to be talked down to by these liberal elite globalist types, and went out and got some. And they would go to, Tractor Supply and get the Horsomatic brand. I don't know what you call it, like Pony RX ivermectin. Yeah, this will trigger the libs. I'm going to take an equine dose. Well, I'm not dumb enough to do that. What I'll do, I'll chop it up here with my bowie knife. That way, it won't, I know I'm not as big as a horse. Some people say I'm hung like one, though. Maybe I'll double the dose.
This is why free speech is so important. That we have an arena of ideas.
Nobody was saying that they couldn't talk about ivermectin. That wasn't the point. Like, this is amazing. The people that were talking about ivermectin, like Joe Rogan, were getting ridiculed. That's part of free speech. If you say something and people are like, yeah, medical science is saying that you're dumb as shit and that nothing that you're saying is useful or correct here. The last time I checked, Joe Rogan's not a doctor. So why am I going to trust him over my doctor or medical researchers who know how this drug works and know how it doesn't work and that it doesn't work for COVID? Oh, they're suppressing Joe Rogan. Last time I checked, tens of millions of dollars that Joe Rogan is getting paid is not evidence of his speech being suppressed. Nicholas says, well, I popped in at a fun time, cued in to hear Jeff trying to get drugs. I'm just trying to get a horse dewormer, man.
And no matter how stupid it seems at the time, at one time, I think for most people on the planet, it was stupid to suggest that the Earth was spherical in shape.
The hell is Doug talking about here? He's comparing flat Earth versus a spherical Earth with, well, people used to think that the Earth, the sun went around the Earth. Everything were like. People thought ivermectin was going to be, that they were hopeful for it because medical researchers looked into it to see if it was a good treatment, and it turned out it wasn't. And when people were like, hey, don't go take the horse dewormer to prevent COVID, people were like, it's not just for horses. I'm taking more. That was a sign that American culture had hit peak zombie movie victim insanity. The people that like walk towards the door that's shaking and growling, and you're like, why would you approach that door? Why is your hand on the door? Are you turning the doorknob? I mean, that was what the pandemic was like, was watching people kind of do this stuff, like what the and then you realize that all those horror movies and all the writers, especially, it was an apology to all the horror movie writers out there. They completely got human nature right. And for those of us who are like, people wouldn't do that in real life, we watched them do it in real time. Nicholas is pretty sure Mr. Hands took an equine dose of something. No one Google that. Don't Google that. I know exactly what Nicola is talking about. It's traumatizing. Not just for Mr. Hands. It's traumatizing. Good to see you, Nicola, by the way, and good to see you too, Nitty. All right, let's go.
Just go outside and look. You see around us? I don't.
I like how I just don't understand why these people were just so put upon. Why were they? I mean, why were we blocking people from talking about the benefits of ivermectin? Nobody was preventing people from talking about ivermectin. What people were doing is like, look, if you're taking an antiparasitic for COVID, you're wasting your time and you're wasting ivermectin. How dare you? You woke libs just want to cancel my speech and cancel me. Like, okay. Is this a side effect of ivermectin? You reacting this way? The Democrats in their bloodlust were lying about the efficacy of ivermectin for COVID. Hillary, Benghazi, Pizza Guy, etc. Jeff really knows how to make people want to do something he told them not to. Sorry. Mr. Hands, folks. You're going to look it up. Make sure you use some kind of security when you do that. Be prepared to burn your laptop.
And it seems like it comes mostly from the left, this fear of misinformation, because, people are stupid. This gets back to the elitism thing versus populism. We really can't trust people to think for themselves.
No, we couldn't. There was a significant portion of people that we found that we watched this happen multiple times during the pandemic. We could not count on people to think for themselves. I remember when local states were trying to impose things like mask mandates because they didn't want to shut down stores. What's the safest way for people to continue to go to shopping market, to a supermarket and get groceries while everybody's possibly spreading this stuff around and you're going to be doing it indoors? You could either blow the roof off the top of the thing so you get plenty of fresh air and sunshine, which they still weren't entirely sure would help at that point, or you could insist that people put masks on. And right after that happened in my own, near my neck of the woods, I think it was the week that it was imposed in my state by state health guidelines, an individual was upset because he wanted to go in to a local grocery store with 2 or 3 of his kids, and there was a woman standing outside. They only had one entrance in there, and they had a limited number of people allowed in the store, and they wanted them all wearing masks. And so she would count the number of people that were in there, count the number of people leaving, which would be a tedious job. He decided that 1, he would not wear a mask. 2, his kids were coming in with him. 3, they were coming in mask free. And 4, he'd get his gun if necessary. And that is precisely what he did. And the only thing that I think he needed to do at the store was return bottles. So he did. He went with his kids. He went and got a gun out of his truck or car. I want to say truck, probably Dodge Ram, and then was pacing in the parking lot, swearing and yelling at this woman because she's an example of the kind of communism that the future holds in store for all of us people who are going to be crushed under the jackboot thuggery of wokeism, while he was brandishing a gun at her. Fortunately, he didn't fire at anybody, but he did brandish the gun at her, and police were called, and he was escorted away. I think his kids were taken back home, and I'm sure he was forced to wear a mask in county. He did have to put on that face tape. I only engaged Doug on Discord, and only because others are no doubt enjoying his self poems. Yeah. I'm back. Can Jefferson go back 20 minutes and start over? I don't want to have to watch it later. Yeah, for you, Pat, I'll do that. People are complaining that these things are on too long as it is.
Even question things.
There's nothing wrong with questioning things. There was nothing wrong with that. They weren't quite. It became a matter of faith that ivermectin worked, and they, all caps, did not want you to know.
So that was my week in shorts, and yeah, it's really interesting to see how the YouTube algorithm works. Like with YouTube Shorts, you're totally at the mercy of the YouTube algorithm.
I should start making shorts.
Because I'll see these shorts.
In fairness, I said 48 hours. Well, I didn't say you were complaining about it, but maybe other people are like, 4 hours. Damn, spatchcock, what's wrong with you? Go touch grass. Nitty says, I never understood the logic of a government wanting to eliminate taxpayers. Yeah, right. Yeah, it makes returning bottles at gunpoint classy. Yeah, and then screaming liberty and freedom at an older lady with a face mask whose job is to make sure people are wearing masks and doing a personal, a customer account so they don't exceed the number of people allowed. This was right at the beginning. This was when things were really heating up and they were trying to figure out, okay, that was when they even had like the lanes where you had to walk, you had to go through the loop, to kind of minimize bypassing people. They tried all sorts of different things. Stickers all over the place to remind people to stay 6 feet away from each other.
Shorts that I like making get almost no views, like 50 views, 60 views. And then in a split second, it will go up to thousands of views per hour. And then YouTube says, okay, that's enough. Cut them off. Close.
Stephanie says, read the conclusions is my favorite Doug moment. When I read them back to him out loud and they said the exact opposite of what he told his audience that were there an hour before. I have a tea time. Oh, I'm late for golf. Yeah. The pandemic set child rearing back for many years. Think of all those kids watching their parents having shit fits for not being able to get what they want. Yeah. Yeah. And then what is the thing now where they're talking about like Gen Alpha? The Gen Alpha are illiterate and feral. Not my words. This is a quote from like I can't remember who it was. I think it was a columnist for the the LA Times. It's an article I read. In fairness, Jefferson's wife is complaining about how short a bunch of things are in their house. Yeah. Well, you gave me $2, so I'll let that pass. But I don't have a wife, so maybe that's why I don't have a wife. Too many short things around here.
Close the valve, and then goes back down to near zero. I haven't figured it out, but it's very interesting. Are you sure there's any reasonable studies to suggest that? Well, whenever you put an adjective like reasonable in front of the word studies, then it's now become subjective, right? Well, I find that study reasonable.
I think what he means by reasonable is like, I wanted to get some studies about milk consumption and long-term health effects. I'm hoping that the study is not from the Dairy Council, right? Like, maybe be charitable with what this person means by reasonable.
But I don't. But there are definitely studies, and I did a video on my political channel, which is now shifted here.
Anthony Palma says, as a teacher, I can vouch for post-COVID kids being out of control. Yeah, if anybody can find, I can't remember where it's at. I should Google it now. I think it was Gen Alpha. Let me just look this up and see if I can find the source. Gen Alpha, illiterate and feral. It was a great quote. It was a doomed generation. It was from the LA Times. It might be behind a paywall. Millennials gave birth to Generation Alpha. Are these kids already doomed? Zoomers fear them. Boomers want more of them. Millennials will keep making them for the rest of the year. Born between roughly 2010 and the end of 2024, Gen Alpha is the demographic successor to Gen Z. Yeah. They'll close the largest cohort of children ever to exist on Earth. There are already concerns that the kids aren't all right. The overwhelming majority have yet to graduate elementary school, and 1 in 5 are still in diapers, yet they are widely being called, quote, feral, illiterate, and doomed on YouTube and TikTok, where alphas themselves make up a large and growing share of users of those platforms. So they're going to be referring to themselves as, we're doomed, we're illiterate, and yeah, we're as wild as the extras in a Mad Max movie.
What was it, 2 years ago now? And more studies are coming out on ivermectin.
Here I thought the issue was a generation being raised by day drinkers. Also an issue.
But it's really hard to disagree with this, that the risks of ivermectin are extremely low of having something bad happen to you. Like from taking.
Not the point. That is not the point. There's no. This is coming from the same people who are suspicious of the side effects that might occur if they get a vaccine. But so what if I experience some of the side effects of taking this completely unnecessary medication that's not going to help with anything? You're wasting a valuable drug to attempt to treat something that it's not suited to purpose. Don't do that. YouTube is blatantly restructuring their app to boost shorts and homepages. My silly short got 2,000 views, and I have 424 subs. I mean, yeah, the shorts are always going to get a lot more views. They're easier to watch. I mean, you're not going to have the click-through rate that you do with long-form stuff like what I do. So yeah. And they do get pushed a lot because I get a wider variety of shorts, which is why my brother was saying, he's like, why do you have so many? It's like, one of the things you were showing on YouTube, there are a bunch of recommended views of like people shooting guns. And I was like, yeah, I watched one video of a guy firing like a flintlock and another guy firing a shotgun that had like 38 rounds in it or something, double tubed. And I liked them. The algorithm knows now. So now, I will get a video of a guy firing a cannon, a girl throwing an axe at a cannon, the two of them firing the cannon and throwing the axe together. Like, just, it's nonstop. Like, it's been, the algorithm for the shorts has been like, crazy weaponized.
Ivermectin. If a doctor says, if you take this amount for this amount of time, the risks are almost zero. And if it's true that it can help some people, what is the frickin' problem?
The problem is having a run of people in a hysteria, in a pandemic, going out and hoarding a medication that is useful for other diseases, and it's unnecessary for them to take it and to have it. That's the problem. Damn it, Doug. Are you fucking stupid? Are you that stupid? Reasonable generally means one of two things in this context. One, methodologically valid, and two, unbiased. Okay, good. I got the unbiased thing, with my example of the milk. That's it. It's not a mystery, Doug. Sweary face. Yeah, stuff like this gets Pat gets him heated. Hits him where he lives and works. You should be way more popular, Jefferson. I appreciate that, but I think I have detractors. Maya says the algorithm is obnoxious. It is. Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's designed to sort of just feed you more of what you already kind of had before, which is kind of dumb because it's like they really need to do this like they need to design the algorithm to be more like a playlist. I think they should take the advice. What was that High Fidelity, that movie where it's talking about how to make a good playlist? They need to factor that into it because it's not, I don't think if they want you to watch it, they shouldn't be just feeding you more and more and more of the exact same kind of stuff. If you're going to get into watching stuff, it needs to find an arc. So if you've been watching for a long time, they got to give you something to kind of cool down and then maybe peak it again and then maybe let you cool down, follow those kinds of, those natural changes. And I probably said too much. YouTube, if you follow this advice, I want credit.
The problem is you're going to take ivermectin in lieu of something else. Well, that's a different argument.
They would. If they go to their doctor's like, look, here's some of the things that I think you ought to take. One, continue taking your actual medications, right? If you're overweight, have blood pressure issues, you don't want to stop taking your blood pressure medications. And you certainly wouldn't want, actually, I think a blood pressure medication might have been one that they were working on because they thought it might help with some of the symptoms. But the idea that somebody, I can afford to skip my some of my normal, routine medications. It's not a big deal. I got ivermectin in me. I'm not going to get COVID. And that's the kind of stuff doctors have to deal with a lot.
Yeah, there's still people who it's almost like the world needs to give people permission to question things.
Since when? Anyway, Pat says the genetic variation to toxicosis when it comes to ivermectin is known by medical experts. The other issue was people engaging in self-dosing, which increases risk. Exactly. Now, I think Doug is trying to say that this isn't a problem. Like, well, you just don't trust people to think for themselves. No, the problem was we had demonstrations of people thinking for themselves. And what they were doing was running off on some very weird fantasies quite often. Like, oh, I can just take ivermectin? Will do. Oh, I can't get ivermectin from my doc because he says no? Screw it. I'm going to the Tractor Supply store. I'll get some that they make for horses. Well, I mean, if it's good for a horse, it's good for Jethro, and down the hatch. Like, you don't want people doing this. The idea of people can think for themselves. 2 words: antibiotic abuse. And that's you're told by your doctor, like they have to do this now explicitly, look you in the eye and be like, look, it's 7 days. Take it as many times per day as it says. You take it for the full 7 days. Do not stop taking it by day 2 just because you feel better. Take the full cycle, no more, no less. When you're done, if you have any bad symptoms, if things start happening, give me a call. But otherwise, take it for its full course. And people will be like, oh, no, I'll pop it for a couple of days and I felt pretty good. And then by day 5, I started noticing it coming back. So I took the rest. Like, don't do that shit. Don't do that. That shit still happens. Doctors still have to correct people on that. So no, this is coming back to this point where I'm like, well, people can think for themselves. Obviously they can. They have the ability to get this wrong. They get it wrong all the time. As a course of public policy dealing with medicine in the face of a national emergency, an international emergency, an unprecedented novel pandemic, at least in our modern times, it was unprecedented as far as I knew. It was a global pandemic, and we had people running, jumping to conclusions about drugs that they should take or could take, and supply chain issues. You don't want people gobbling up a medicine when it doesn't do you any good when you have supply chain issues, and you might need those antiparasitics for actual parasitic infections. Don't do that.
Or to say something that is maybe a minority view. It's same with the COVID vaccine, but that's changing too. I predict in a decade for sure, people are going to look back, and then because they don't care as much anymore. But it's already happening even 4 years later that people are questioning the risk reward ratios.
There's literally like practically no reward to ivermectin. Like I said, the closest one that came to showing any kind of positive result was some kind of statistical variation in ivermectin possibly helping people with long COVID symptoms after 6 or 7 months, possibly shortening the duration of that. But other factors could have been at play that they hadn't accounted for. So even there, it's kind of a push as far as like actually dealing with the virus in any way, preventing it, treating it, or curing it. None of those three things apply. There's no point in taking ivermectin. There never was. They were hoping it was going to work. They were especially hoping it would help treat the symptoms to keep people from, kind of collapsing into the really negative side effects and passing away. But it didn't happen. You want ivermectin without a prescription? Go into your lab, compound the drug, and take as much of it as you would like to. That's how freedom works. It's funny that Doug is for informed consent when it comes to eating dewormers, but adamantly opposed to the same when related to gender dysphoria. Great point. He'll frequently ask somebody like me. In fact, somebody came after me and said, well, you're avoiding his hypothetical, because he was trying to use the whole, well, Jefferson, do you think it's okay for a kid to go to a doctor once or twice and that doctor's automatically giving them hormone replacement therapy? I'm like, I don't know if that's appropriate or not. I'm not a doctor and neither are you. What about the hypothetical? I don't know. That'd be like asking me, do you think it's appropriate to sail this ship under these conditions around these geographical features? I don't know. Not a sailor. So I appreciate the hypothetical, but I can't really give you an informed answer other than, well, I feel that might be a bad idea. But you know what? In certain things, there are counterintuitive. You can't just trust your intuition when you're not an expert in it, because some of those things are not going to avail themselves well to intuition. Not only that, but I am a little suspicious when these people with these narratives come out and say, well, you only went to that doctor one time and all of a sudden you got your hormone replacement or you got your puberty blockers. Yeah, but that may have been the specialist that just got referred to, and they've been seeing their primary care physician about this for months. It amazes me that you like the issue of care for when it comes to like trans care and medical care in this stuff is that these guys seem to think that, oh, you can just go into a doctor's office and get whatever you want and they have to give it to you because you said so. My experience with healthcare has been the exact effing opposite of that. Most people's is. You don't just get what you want because you asked or because you demanded it. It just flies in the face of that. And the idea here that like, well, they can think for themselves and they know they can look up the risks and they can take the ivermectin if they want to. And who's to say it's going to harm anybody? Exactly. So why are you giving people like, do you think it's okay for somebody to have puberty blockers? And you'd be like, well, they are reversible, right? Well, not in the way you think. Okay. Well, did you know that ivermectin can cause these side effects like dizziness that can make people pass out? It can affect your heart. I mean, did you know? Well, I mean, people can think for themselves, can't they? Well, under certain circumstances, it sounds like they can. And which circumstances would those be, Doug?
For certain individuals of the COVID vaccine. But 10 years from now, my prediction is society is going to give a broad permission to question it. Right now, it's just starting.
That's an even more interesting point, though, Cocos. You can't really get informed consent from a kid. I would disagree with that to an extent. It depends on the kid that you're talking to. It depends on how young. And that gets into a longer thing. But would Doug have a problem with the doctor recommending a kid take ivermectin?
If it's Bernie Sanders versus Trump, who do you think would win 2024? That's a good question. I still think Trump. Because Bernie he doesn't have a big enough base, in my opinion. Having the population panic and start hoarding a medicine that is beneficial for treating other conditions is not cool.
That was me. That was my comment.
Hoarding are you talking about hoarding ivermectin? I mean, ivermectin is cheap to make, cheap to get. And again, if you
We had people hoarding toilet paper. We had people hoarding. People were literally profiteering off paper products and hand sanitizer, and we ran out of them. And hand sanitizer and paper products are notoriously cheap. We ran out. They were rationing them. Did he not? Maybe he's got a washlet toilet in the the Japanese style toilet, and the toilet paper never affected him. And he probably doesn't use like a hand sanitizer because it's too clean or something. Who knows? I don't know. He probably just like puts his hands in some sand or something.
Do you think there's no studies that show that ivermectin does indeed help? I think you're wrong.
What?
If you think there's no studies that show that ivermectin does indeed help,
there aren't any. I can't find any. They don't do what people want them to do for COVID. They simply don't.
I think you're wrong.
There's no point in taking ivermectin. Like I said, the last one I saw, I think, was like from 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a British study, and that was the one where they were like, maybe it works on some long COVID symptoms, maybe, but not for an acute case. It doesn't do anything for an acute case. It probably doesn't do anything for the long COVID symptoms either. There could be other factors at play there. But if you're trying to take it to prevent getting it, it doesn't prevent you from contracting the virus. It doesn't help treat the symptoms or prevent them from becoming severe. And it certainly doesn't kill the virus. So it doesn't cure it. So
it's surprising to me that a lot of people don't even know this yet.
that people don't know that ivermectin is secretly valuable. It's really valuable as an antiparasitic. Nobody's denying that. Completely off topic. The wife and I watched the movie Mandy last night. That's a fucking weird movie. It's great. Love that movie. How about that horn of Abraxas thing that they blow and those like bikers from hell show up? They look like Sauron. Movie's nuts.
They're still under the illusion that, everything I was told 3 years ago was correct. So I don't need to think about it anymore. By the way,
what? What?
Chris Como, it's not clear to me if he's suffering from long COVID or if he is suffering from the effects of the COVID vaccine. He hasn't come out and said what he believes, but he hinted towards it. That I think he believes that, this guy, Chris Como, I think he believes that the vaccine hurt him more than COVID did. That's another thing. For some people, they need permission to even consider that. I would say the vast majority of people are scared to say that out loud about anyone, that the COVID vaccine might have done more harm than the COVID virus.
It did not. There's a very simple way of looking at this. Find the number of people that died as a result of the COVID virus, and then find the number of people that died as a result of being vaccinated for the COVID. It's an apples and apples comparison. Which one kills more? Not which one hurts, not which one causes side effects, none of that. Which one killed people? Because the purpose of a vaccine is to give your body the ability to develop antibodies so that if you do contract it, hopefully it'll reduce your chances of getting it. But if you do get it, your body has, it's done a practice run. It has the ability to fight that virus so that you don't get as sick and you get healthier more quickly. That's the point of a vaccine. The fact that somebody like you might have had 1 in 100 million people develop Guillain-Barré, which can happen even with flu shots, is not going to stack up to the millions that died from COVID. This is flat out disinformation from Doug. Flat out.
For certain individuals. If you can admit that to yourself, even when you're home alone inside your own brain, if you can admit that to yourself, I think that's actually the first step in thinking critically. Are there any of the Trump indictments that you think are legit and worth?
I took 3 doses, each killed me. Yeah, it has a different effect on everybody. I mean, some people, and it depends on which version that you got. I remember I got mostly all I think every one that I got was Pfizer, except for the very last one, which was not a booster. It was a new one. I think that one was from Moderna. That one kind of made me nauseated for half a day. The third or fourth booster that I got, whichever version that was, it was a Pfizer one. That one left me feeling kind of run down. But for the most part, I got pretty lucky with all my reactions to it. None of them really bothered me all that much. I did have a run where I got one of them, then got a flu shot, then got a pneumonia shot. By the time I got that pneumonia shot, my immune system was run down and reacting like crazy because I did them 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that. And it turns out that's a good way to maximize feeling like crap from your immune system reacting to a vaccine. And it sure did. I should have done the COVID and flu together, and probably should have waited another month or two to get the pneumonia one.
Pursuing. Definitely the E. Jean Carroll case. No, I think she's insane. I think most of the E. Jean Carroll case was about bitterness against abortion, Roe v. versus Wade being overturned.
No, probably not. I mean, is he trying to say that people are bitter about the Roe v. Wade thing, and that's why a jury sided with E. Jean Carroll in her case? Okay. I do want to respond to this. Ivermectin must be taken early. That's not true. It helps symptoms if taken early. Also not true. If you take a look at the New England Journal of Medicine, and this one was written in, when was the date on this one? March 30th of 2022, and this is one of the more recent ones I can find. Conclusions: treatment with ivermectin did not result in a lower incidence of medical admission to a hospital due to progression of COVID-19 or prolonged emergency department observation among outpatients with an early diagnosis of COVID-19. And the studies are cited there, and there's about half a dozen authors on that one. So no, that doesn't seem to be a thing. There were ones in 2021. Remission of fever, cough, and sore throat did not differ among treatment groups. That's from the International Journal of Infectious Diseases. So no, that's not a thing either. I see Doug's feeling homicidal now. Yeah, how are the anti-science folks so for a niche drug like ivermectin, but against free/simple measures like masks and distancing? Yeah, I mean, and they ended up finding out that the masks, they were trying to say the masks didn't do anything because of the result of the meta-analysis, which is something that he cited. And the guy that he was citing, the guy that kind of spoke out, who worked on with the group that did the meta-analysis of the studies, they had to come out and say, well, actually, we had to revise our summary because it's not exactly what we wanted to communicate, and he shouldn't have been speaking about it that way because that's not the conclusion that we reached. Most of the conditions where they were trying to find out where people were wearing masks and doing this kind of thing, they weren't equal. They weren't even close. So there were a lot of problems with that one. And he tried to bring that up and say, "Oh, this now we know." When we know that I guess that we can be safe in assuming Joe Rogan is right about taking ivermectin. Everyone's wrong about wearing masks, especially in like enclosed spaces. So, yeah, 3 doses here, slight flush for 2 hours after second shot. Yeah, that's kind of what yeah. I think somebody said something. It was a form of gene therapy, some of which turned out was contaminated. Yeah, but that doesn't. If some of it was contaminated, it's not going to be contaminated. Like I've heard this before. Like, oh, it's contaminated. It's going to do something to you. It can't. That was also a lot of doomsaying. mRNA is used to inject a portion of targetable gene for the immune system to react and adapt to that, as it is the vaccine. Yeah, that's how the vaccine is supposed to work. It's not changing your genes. And somebody's trying to say, oh, it stays there and then it like mutates, and then I think it becomes an eye, an evil eye opens, and then over time, if you allow it to grow, a hellhound will emerge, and then kill everyone in your vicinity. So yeah, you do want to do something, apply a salve, or some kind of freezing spray or something like that, and eventually the tissue around it will die and it'll fall off. No big deal.
She basically came out and admitted that on MSNBC. The confidential document case, no. The Georgia case, I think it was highly unethical, but I don't think it was illegal. Again, that's could be subjective. Oh, speaking of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I wonder how many
Oh, is that where this hellhound came from? I mean, that's where mine came from. I mean, results may vary.
Democrats are looking at Fannie Willis and wondering, I mean, she screwed that up so badly.
She screwed it up pretty bad.
Maybe she just got in because of diversity. I wonder how many Democrats are thinking that way. Because Republicans are thinking that way.
Well, yeah, because a lot of Republicans are racist, Doug.
At least some of them.
Most of them.
The fake electors case is probably the strongest one. But again, like that Jack Smith screwed things up. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the easy, quick answer to your question is no.
So none of the cases have any. Well, I guess we're going to have to wait and find out. I think that the documents case that he's currently going through right now, not the documents case, not the ones from Mar-a-Lago, but the forging of the business documents for his payments to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, I think that has real teeth. But a lot of the details are super boring because most of the strongest evidence is documents, and they're not talking about that in the media. They're talking about Stormy Daniels getting salacious about their hookup details. Marty says, I got my ass handed to me with COVID. I was bedridden for 3 weeks when it first came around. I seem to recall that. I think I remember that, Marty. You were looking kind of rough. And everybody was terrified at that point because anybody that got it early on, everybody was just like, oh, crap, what's going to happen next? I hope you don't end up in the hospital on a tube. For some of my relatives, they had it. One of my relatives had it 3 times over the course of the pandemic. And he got some weird symptoms later on.
Jefferson says it's a good med, but I haven't seen anything that shows it helps with COVID. Well, seek and you shall find.
I saw it. I didn't find it.
Do you think the vax did anything to you? Yeah, I do think so. I think it caused.
I think it made him more conservative, right? He's been more conservative since he's gotten the vax.
Me to have blood clots, very tiny ones.
Tiny blood clots. That can happen.
Yeah, I think it definitely did something to my nephew within hours of him taking the vaccine.
Did he get
collapsed on the? He took the vaccine. Maybe it was a day later. He collapsed on the rhesus field. Then they had to monitor him very closely with a heart monitor. My sister is still suffering from the effects of the COVID vaccine with extreme allergic reactions.
No, sitting 4 hours a day to stream is giving you blood clots. That's why I'm bending I'm moving my legs constantly under this desk right now. Terrified of blood clots. I thought it was a sister. I'm not sure.
Like years later. Yeah. And I went through this on many live streams that if you look at how many people go to the hospital from a serious side effect of the vaccine, like they have to be hospitalized.
Who? He's talked about this before, and I've attempted to look this up. If you try to find this, if you look, hospitalization rates for people following COVID vaccine. Most of what you're going to end up finding is going to be information connected to whether or not the people who were vaccinated ended up developing a form of COVID so severe that they had to be hospitalized because of intubation or something like that. Usually what you're looking at are selected adverse events reported after, and that's how they usually refer to them. Let's see, what's the newest update? This one was from September of 2023. As at the April 19th, 2023 meeting of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the CDC presented data related to further analysis of preliminary safety signal for persons ages 65 years and older who received the updated bivalent Pfizer vaccine. Other safety monitoring systems have not observed similar findings. As time has passed, more safety data have accumulated. The initial finding has decreased. And scientists believe factors other than vaccination might have contributed to the initial finding. This had something to do with the bivalent one causing an increase, I think, in adverse side effects. The current evidence does not support the existence of a safety issue. FDA and CDC will continue to evaluate data as they are available and update the public as needed. Let's see, the usual stuff is benefits of COVID-19 vax continue to outweigh any potential risks. Severe reactions after COVID-19 vaccination are rare, and severe ones are the ones that are going to lead to hospitalization. And they're very rare. CDC recommends everyone, blah, blah, blah. Millions of people in the U.S. have received them. Anaphylaxis, which is one of the most serious adverse effects that you can have, is rare, but people do have it. It occurred at a rate of approximately 5 cases per million vaccine doses administered. Anaphylaxis is a severe type of allergic reaction, can occur after any kind of vaccine. Let's see, reports of death. And there's a variety of stuff there. You know what? I'll just pop that in the side chat for any of you to peruse at your leisure. There it is. But take a look at that. I'm kind of curious to read about this, but I'm not gonna do that now. I'll take a look at it later, though. I'm kind of curious about because one of the biggest ones is going to be Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, after COVID-19 vaccination. It's very rare, but it does happen. And COVID vaccines aren't the only ones that can trigger GBS. So.
Or go to the hospital with a serious side effect. And then look how many of them would go to the hospital if they had severe COVID. For certain demographics, the risks of the vaccine outweigh the benefits.
They do. They still do. Odin, you cannot make an informed decision when the information quite simply was not available. The vaccine were taken of faith and bad foundation for decision. They weren't. In fact, Michael just brought up what I was going to say. The COVID vaccine was based on 20-year-plus old SARS variant vaccines. There was lots of information out there. Ignorance is an argument. The vaccine was fine. The vaccine is fine. Yeah. This is not this. The only thing that they ended up doing, most of the stuff that would happen around SARS vaccination efforts would happen in fits and starts. And they'd been working on this stuff. And they were also working on another vaccine technology to deal with Ebola. And they do now have at least one Ebola vaccine. That technology, I think, might actually be newer. And I think that technology is in one of the other lesser known versions of COVID vaccines. But the mRNA technology has been around for at least 2 decades. They've been using it. The trick was whether or not they were going to be able to get it, test it, find that effective rate of triggering the immune system so that it develops antibodies, but without having severe reactions, because you can overdo it. That is a problem. Vaccines can be dangerous if they are not tuned to appropriately stimulate the immune system, and they overdo it, and you end up having what's called a cytokine storm, and an overreaction of the immune system, and your immune system literally starts tearing you apart. You want to avoid that. And that's the thing that you have to fine tune. But the mRNA stuff, they tried to sit like people were talking about this back when it first came out. And I was stunned by this. It's 20 years. It was 20 years old at least. This was a technology that they had been working on. In fact, they still think that it could be. It has the promise for yielding good results for a potential universal flu vaccine. If they get research for that, they probably won't. They probably won't get the funding for that. But you can make an informed decision. Not only that, but this flies in the face of the actual facts, because the mRNA technology was fine. The mRNA technology is not the only technology available in COVID vaccines. the Janssen virus, the Johnson & Johnson one, was not mRNA based. And there was another one that wasn't mRNA based either. So you weren't limited to getting the mRNA one. People talk about the jab as if it's just one thing. There were different versions, and some of the, like Pfizer and Moderna went with the mRNA technology, but there were different ones out there. And if you look those up, you'll see what the variations are. And I can't remember which one, because one of them is kind of based on a real tried and true version of it, but I don't think it's as effective as the mRNA ones. And then the one of the other ones I think was built off. They used the Ebola vaccine technology as their starting point and built one around that. Again, you can find that information out based on the dose requirements. You can get that information before you get the jab.
And again, you have to, for a lot of people to even consider that as a possibility, for a lot of people, they have to be given permission to even consider that, to even think about that. Especially if you lean left, you have to be told by someone, okay, we now give you permission to consider that as a real possibility.
Let's see here. But Odin, if you're watching Dr. John Campbell, he's a doctor in nursing, and a lot of his stuff, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but a lot of his recommendations in terms of dealing with like patient care for individuals and things like that is a little bit misguided if you're trying to talk about things like epidemiology, immunology, and virology. He's not an expert in this field. I mean, he does have medical training, but he's also running off on some very kooky ideas, and he has been debunked multiple times by medical scientists that know better. The idea that you're going to, like, one of the things that I find fascinating about this is nobody in the medical community said that the vaccine was going to be pleasant. No one in the medical community said that it was going to make sure that you never got so much as a sniffle from the coronavirus. No one said that in the medical community, right? Now, maybe your own primary practitioner did, in which case find another one. But for the most part, the medical information that was coming out of these sources was very clear. If you get a vaccine, there are risks of side effects. Getting one doesn't feel good, and the side effects can make you feel crappy for 2 to 3 days. That can happen. That happens with lots of vaccines. That's your immune system kicking your own ass. That's how it works. That's why it works. The idea that, like they were like, well, they told us that once we got it, we were one and done. No, they didn't. They said there would be more. They said there were multiple dosages. They said they might suck a little bit. They said supply might be limited. And they said that you might have side effects. Your arm's going to hurt. You're going to run a fever. You're going to feel like shit. They told us this. But people were running around saying, well, they never warned me about it. They fucking did. They absolutely did. And guys like Dr. John Campbell are running around trying to spin off the same thing. Like, well, these guys are just trying to sell you, like some magic potion. And that's not what it is. No one promised that it was some magic bullet. That increases your body's chances of fighting off COVID, which gives you a better fighting chance of dealing with the virus should you contract it. That's it. That's how vaccines work. And for whatever reason, people had this strange obsession with, like, well, first of all, the technology is not proven. Yes, it was. Well, it's brand new. No, it's not. Well, it's dangerous. No, it isn't. It's no more dangerous than any other stuff that's out there. Well, I can't possibly make an informed decision about the different options I have. Yes, you have. It's called reading. Well, we only have the mRNA technology and they're forcing it upon us. No, they're not. Because no, it isn't. That's not the only one that you have available to you. There's others. None of this lines up. None of it. All this has been debunked repeatedly, exhaustively. And somebody like Doug is just sort of spinning it up. But this is a guy that after not getting all the skin cancer off a portion, decided to freeze off the rest of it with a spray. I would not take medical advice from this guy. He's treating skin cancer with home-based remedies, like he's just DIYing it when he needs to go back to the doctor and get those margins checked and get that out, because you don't want to play with skin cancer. Just my advice. Free medical advice. Not a doctor. Do not accept my advice as medical advice. See your general practitioner.
Guy who's skeptical about ivermectin.
What is the Gish Gallop, Odin? I'm not Gish Galloping. The Gish Gallop is, these are the assumptions people are making. The vaccines aren't safe. They are. Are they free of side effects? No, but they're safer than COVID. That's the point. They're not free of risk, but neither is getting COVID. And usually the choice being made is, I'd rather get COVID than get the vaccine. Like I said before, to answer Doug's question, if you want to see which one's worse, give me the numbers of people who died as a result of getting vaccinated versus the numbers of people who died as a result of contracting COVID. Show me that. You show me that, and I will shut right up. But if you're trying to tell me that I'm gish galloping, most of the stuff that you're running about is based on gish galloping. I can't trust the vaccines because they have side effects. No one said they wouldn't. There's nothing wrong with that. The fact they make you feel bad is the point. You're going to get a little uncomfortable because your immune system is working. Some people are lucky. They don't feel much of a thing. Other people feel like shit. Them's the breaks. That's just differences in people's reaction. It's differences in the way their immune system reacts. If you're trying to say, we weren't informed about the technologies for these, we were, and you had options. Everything that I'm hearing from people like you that have been, these are excuses not grounded in reality. I'm not taking this mRNA technology. It's new, untested, and it's the only one available. All three of those statements are categorically, demonstrably incorrect. It was researched. It was older technology. It was well tested. It's relative. It is safe. It's incredibly effective. The results have shown that. And it wasn't the only one that you had available to you.
But really enthusiastic about puberty blockers is the worst type of person. Yeah, that's very interesting comments, Sneed McFeed. Oh, ivermectin. No, it's that's for horses. But giving testosterone to women, to girls, that's okay.
People have died heart issues, long-term. Yes, some people have had those issues. Yes, just like some people got GBS. Those can happen with other vaccines. The issue, my God, the issue isn't that there aren't risks. No one promised a risk-free vaccine. If you thought that was the point, you completely misunderstand basic medicine and immunology. Not even a flu vaccine comes with no risk. They all carry some risk. You see those videos of people who have GBS as a result of a flu vaccine? That can happen to you. The idea was you want to get people vaccinated who can safely be vaccinated, who can assume that risk, because the more people who are vaccinated, they're not going to spread it as much, they're not going to get it as badly, they're going to survive longer, they're going to be happier, healthier, and all that good stuff. For taking a small risk of a vaccine. The vaccine, you're weighing the risks of dying from COVID versus getting the vaccine and dealing with its side effects. It is tragic that people develop heart issues or get GBS as a result of their immune system being stimulated by those vaccines. That's what's happening. But that was part of the risk. We were in the middle of a pandemic, and we're getting very good medication, very good medicine. And the rate of risk for that versus what you were going to deal with if you got COVID multiple times was well worth it. I don't understand this stuff. It sucks that somebody developed like a heart arrhythmia from it, because that did happen in younger men. They noticed that there was this uptick in this, and they required ablations in order to treat that. But that happened in young men who got COVID too. It happened to more young people that got COVID than got vaccinated. And those rates are out there. So trying to say that all of this is based on this notion that you have to have a vaccine that produces absolutely no side effects. The point of a vaccine is to stimulate your immune system, which is in and of itself a side effect. It will make you feel like shit. That is not 100% safe. It's basically putting your body through a test run so that when it encounters the real thing in the wild, it has a fighting chance. That's it. It was tested. They tested it a lot. They were concerned that they weren't going to have enough testing. One of the things that people were complaining, well, we want it now, we'll assume the risk. And then when it came out and some of these things happen, like they happened with other vaccines, people were, and no amount of risk is worth it. I'd rather just get COVID. That was a completely irrational, that was a complete non sequitur. That was an example of what, like Doug said. Well, you can trust people to think for themselves. No, you cannot. Not with something as counterintuitive as immunology. I'll just deal with getting the virus. You're statistically much more likely to die from the virus than you are from the side effects from the vaccine. Probabilistically, the smart bet is to get the vaccine.
It's all about I think the root of it is good. The root of this thinking is compassion. I think a lot of people on the left do have a good heart, but I am convinced,
not after they take the vaccine, they don't.
The compassion is probably the worst thing in the world to help you reason properly.
No, it isn't.
If you are so compassionate about trans people, and so when they hurt, you actually hurt. If that's you, if I'm describing you, I would claim it's almost next to impossible for you to think objectively about certain issues dealing with trans issues.
This coming from a guy who assumes that trans women are dangerous from the jump. Like, I'm not assuming this narrative about anyone in the discussion. But Doug's primary concern about the trans issue is that doctors for monetary issues are trying to make kids get hormone therapy and sex change operations, and that trans women are a danger to real women, his words, when they enter their spaces in bathrooms and in sports. Is Doug trying to say that he is not motivated by his feelings of compassion, his feeling that the women that he's concerned about are threatened? So he's saying that, well, compassion is the worst thing that you can have, motivating or informing or otherwise fuzzing up, putting a little white noise and static in your critical thinking responses. How about fear, Doug? How about fear? Trans women can't be trusted in public bathrooms. They can't be trusted in sports. They can't be trusted in public. They can't be trusted when they campaign or when they do pride parades, right? Compassion's bad. Fear, not a problem. Fear, that really, fear and hate, good starting points for reasonable, concise, clinical thinking. Yeah.
I want to get back to this women in voting thing.
Oh,
one of
no.
the first shorts, if you came late, I played what?
I didn't watch this part, so I'll let this go on for a little bit longer, and then I'll probably get out of here. I'm kind of curious what he's going to do about this, because he actually came out. He's like, some women were misbehaving. Some women representatives in the House of Congress, they were having a committee meeting, and during that, there was a little back and forth. MTG made fun of somebody's fake eyelashes. AOC blew up at that because it's a blatant violation of certain rules of decorum. You're not supposed to insult other reps' opinions or their physical appearance. Which makes me wonder, like, if you showed up wearing like a Bozo the Clown wig, and maybe a clown nose, are they not allowed to talk about it? I'm wondering about that. I'd push that rule. But that's just me being a troll. That would be me guaranteeing to be a one-termer. So they have this back and forth, and Doug brings up this crazy, like, well, I don't know, but maybe women shouldn't vote. I'm not saying that they shouldn't vote, but I think there's people are talking about it. People are talking, like Andrew Wilson is talking about it. Jimab is talking about it. Andrew Tate talks about that kind of stuff. You know what we should do? You know what would make America better? Making more than half of its population second-class citizens somehow. They'll love it. That's essentially their entire shtick. And Doug's here like, well, people are saying, maybe it wouldn't be bad. Like, it's almost guaranteed to be worse than anything you've witnessed. I've had a total of 6 jabs for COVID-19, 2 initial jabs for the first vaccine, and then 4 boosters. I'm perfectly fine. Twitch, right there with you. I'm fine. Yeah, same number. In fact, they left one laying around, and I squirted it onto my tongue. Give me that vax. Yeah, Stephanie said Doug is not concerned about women, cisgender or transgender. Yeah. If he was concerned about women, then he should be concerned about transgender women. But he's more concerned about maintaining his misogynistic talking points and using cisgender women and transgender women and pitting them against each other in order to trigger his dopamine in this culture war bullshit that he gravitates towards.
Was this debacle that happened last night at the Capitol. Do you guys agree with me that there is more and more men who are questioning whether women should vote?
No. I mean, there's more outspoken guys who are doing what I'm doing, sitting in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, and then trying to make the case like, you know what women need? Fewer rights. They need to lack access to jobs. They shouldn't participate as political citizens. They'd be happier if they just married up young and had kids and were homemakers. Guys are trying to make this connect. And they're not just saying women would be better off. All of society would be better off if we could just somehow get women to understand that they would be happier personally and the country would be healthier as a whole if they just, toe the line and assume this role. Mostly because these guys are too lazy and frankly, too spiteful and too ignorant to work through some of the difficult concepts out there about gender issues, sex issues, rights issues, hell, just even basic issues about democracy, equal protection under the law. They'd rather just like, you know what, men, man smart, women dumb, man run roost, women produce kids and make sandwich. That's it. And like if they just get back to and it's kind of it's based on these guys got a big chip on their shoulder because they're conservative. That's usually part of it. There's a reaction based on an overdeveloped sense of either fear or disgust. It's usually both, but one is usually a little bit higher and the other just depends on which one you're dealing with. And then motivating that going forward is sort of the psychological approach. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience. So maybe not all conservatives are like this, but there's actually political psychology studies out there that back up what I'm saying here. Not to sound like Doug, but I think there's good studies out there. If their narrative is going to be, well, if we just get these things right, 6 points, 12 points, 10 points, whatever, fulfill these things, get these things right, everything will fall into place. Will there be outliers? Sure. Will things occasionally go wrong? Yeah, we'll fix them. But as long as you're on the game plan and doing what you need to do, then God will bless you, or America will prosper, or the economy will reward you because the invisible hand of the free market will give you a reach around because you managed to supply it with virgins or with low taxes or whatever it is, whatever magical thinking you want to chalk up into that. And that's where these guys are going. And the funny thing is that it's magical thinking. The horrifying thing is that it's motivated from spitefulness and ignorance. The spitefulness is the chip on their shoulder. They feel like something is out to get them, something they are being put upon by a them, and they need to get them. They need to change the system to suit their needs. And they actually think in their weird red pilled zones that if they could do this and force the culture to, just get women to accept, who are over half the population, just get them to accept a position of being a second class citizen, and things will be better for everybody. And they're the ones that are, because they're channeling the church or they're, whatever their church tradition is or something like that. They've got their finger on the pulse of what's really going on, what people really want. And then what they don't want is the stuff that they hate, like, okay. Yeah. Not at all deranged.
Or is it just me seeing stuff on YouTube? Like in your own personal lives, do you get any inkling of that? Like when I was at a conference in Phoenix with Reed, I talked to a guy who basically said that women should not be allowed to vote. And I remember guys like The Crucible and Jim Bob, they will say things like that too, I think.
Yes, they want to see women relegated to second-class citizens, which is that's a hell of a thing to think is one, they think it's necessary. They think it's necessary for an ideally prosperous society, I believe would be their take. Will there be detractors? Certainly. Are there going to be problems with it? Yeah. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Alpha males only.
And Pearl Davis, is that her name? So there's a lot of YouTube channels talking about it.
Yeah, Pearl Davis is not a great example because the only group of people that Pearl hates more than women is men.
But is that actually hitting the real world? I don't know.
Yeah, Doug's doing someone said again. Well, I don't think that if Doug's wondering if this is getting out there, yeah, sure. I mean,
but
Jim Obb and Andrew Wilson specifically, these Orthodox Christian bros are trying to push a conservative culture war agenda on young, spiteful, ignorant men. That's their primary argument. And if you think that that's not the case, come at me. The biggest motivators for getting involved in conservative politics is a feeling of spitefulness. Someone has done something, and usually it's a spitefulness that triggers an insecurity so great you start having revenge fantasies about boogeyman, or where do you think that this home defense kind of fetish comes from? I carry a gun to protect myself and my family and my home, and if anybody comes near me, I'll blow their yeah, I bet you would. But also seems like you're strangely tumescent when you talk about it. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe your spitefulness, that chip on your shoulder, is fueling that home defense, self-defense, constitutional carry fetish that you got going on. And it's not about defending yourself. It's about inflicting pain on an other. And somehow you're going to vicariously feel relieved after that. A lot of that's in there. A lot of it is. And then the ignorance part, because if you're distracted by the spitefulness, you're going to be motivated by the anger. You're running on adrenaline like a honey badger. The last thing that you're going to want to do is take a deep breath, and try to focus on being self-aware of what your motives are, being self-aware of your feelings, and then trying to understand your perspective, and then trying to understand someone else's perspective and their lived experience. Almost impossible. And the more you go into situations where Andrew Wilson or Jim Bob are at, and they're trying to do running their game, it's just feeding somebody who has a chip on their shoulder and is ignorant. It's providing them what they want. It's confirming their biases. It's like, oh, I was onto something. I knew it. And Jim Bob and Andrew Wilson are there like, yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't need to know those things. Ignorance rewarded. You're right to be angry about the things that have spitefulness rewarded. And here are your targets. The other half of the country. Women. Women just need to become second-class citizens and you'll be better. Like, well, legally, right? There's no argument. Like, yeah, I'm a better citizen than you because we passed a law making sure that men are automatically, definitionally. It's absolutely childish. These guys have to do better, and they are literally saying what used to be the quiet part out loud and proud. Will be the best when we make everyone a step worse than us. And we're going to use the state and the church and social media to do it. Pearl Davis, the woman who gives marriage advice to women on what men want without ever being married, getting catfished by a homeless man, and who sings anti-Semitic guitar songs. Good reference. Eesh. Didn't know about the catfishing incident, but that's funny. The anti-Semitic guitar songs. I'll look that up later. Tumescent and turgid for want of power.
What I said earlier about compassion is probably the biggest hindrance to figuring out what's true. And I think when it comes to negative emotions, women, they tend to have more empathy and they tend to be affected more negative.
And those are negative emotions as opposed to Doug's 100% coolly rational fear and disgust of things.
Than men on negative experiences.
No.
And so on a lot of these issues, women are going to vote, and probably at 60-40, something like that. It's not a huge difference, but when you're talking about a huge country, 10% is huge.
Okay. What percentage of this country does he think that the number of people who identify as socialist is a significant number? I don't think he thinks that that's a thing. I don't think he would say that that's an issue, even though it's becoming more. I think it's something that younger people are more likely to say that they are, that they lean socialist or they are socialist. They're in that kind of left-wing camp. The idea that, well, there's 10% of the population out there wants to see women lose their right to vote. Yeah. Okay. How are they going to get that? How are they going to justify? How is that 10% going to justify over 50-some% of the population becoming second-class citizens and having the state enforce that, given the Constitution that we have now, and the Bill of Rights that we have, and the constitutional law, and the court precedents that we have now? I mean, what Jimab and Andrew Wilson and others are hoping for is a pipe dream.
So if women tend to vote 60% one way, men tend to vote 40%. If you remove the women's vote, everything changes on certain issues.
Yes, if the people that represent 52 to 54% of the population, because I think it varies, but it's usually 48% men, 52% women, I think, maybe roughly. If you were to relegate more than half of the population into a class of second-class citizens that no longer has the right to vote, it would drastically affect elections. Yes. How are you going to get over half the population to willingly disempower themselves? And how are you going to justify them removing themselves from public engagement in life? And letting the government stamp that and say, yep, this is how things work now. It's not going to happen.
Given the way politics is in the United States right now, if this next election coming up in November, if it were illegal for women to vote, Democrats would not have a chance. They would not win. It wouldn't even be close. Right. And the reverse is true. If men couldn't vote in this upcoming November election, Republicans would not have a chance.
Actually, going the other way, they might, because there are, I think, white women are still slightly more Republican. Maybe not. It depends on the age. It starts changing with the age demographic. But a lot of white women still vote Republican.
Would not even be close. Democrats would win in a landslide. What I just said is true, based on exit poll data.
Isn't Doug ignoring the fact removing the rights for women to vote makes another huge issue? Yeah, I mean, you'd basically have to you would have to establish a very different constitution. You'd have to completely throw out a lot of court precedent, a lot of case law, and kind of just start over. And then you'd have to, and then how are you going to make the argument that men have the right to vote, men have the right to engage in public political life, but women cannot? How do you justify that?
And I do question young people voting. In order to rent a car, you have to be 25. You have to have enough experience in driving in order to rent a car. I think that's true in most states. You need to be 25. So what if we were to up the age of voting to 25, except for maybe if you are in the military or you have a year or more of community service? Democrats wouldn't have a chance, I don't think. If nobody under 25 could vote, Democrats, I don't think, would have a prayer.
I don't think he's taking into account that a lot of people under the age of 25 don't turn out to vote. One of the most difficult things for Democrats to deal with is during the midterm elections, that are not presidential. It's very difficult to get the youth vote to turn out anyway. So the idea of raising it, I don't know, would, in those, and that's usually when they end up losing a lot of their power. Because oftentimes, you might get somebody popular that comes in a presidential election like an Obama, and maybe gets all three. They get the Senate and the House, but then they end up losing them in the midterm election. And a lot of times the turnout for Democratic voters It's not that good, especially amongst the youngest of Democratic voters. So what he's talking about here, I don't think is going to change. I mean, right, especially if he's just spinning up like, I wonder what, who can we disenfranchise to really hurt Democrats? Well, women, and that's what Wilson and Jim Bob are already ahead of him, ahead of the curve on him with this. They want about 52% of the population to be relegated to second-class citizenship status with no right to vote. Yes, that would damage the Democratic Party. When you have over half of the population not able to vote, it's going to radically change voter turnout. But then you have literally a minoritarian rule. There's a right to vote, but only for men, and men make up a slightly slower proportion in the population than the women do. How do you justify that? How do you justify a minoritarian view? Or minoritarian
So right now,
rule?
the Democrats are more likely to win if women vote and if young people vote. People who have...
And people of color. Even though there are demographic shifts that you see sometimes, you know, from election to election, where you might see more black men vote for a Republican candidate, but it'll, you know, I think right now it's polling at like 16%, 16 or 17% amongst black men for Trump upcoming. And if they actually vote in those numbers, that would be, I think that might set a new record, because George W. Bush, I think, was one of the highest Republicans. And I don't remember if it was first or second term, but he was like 8%. And I think Trump tied him in his first election back in 2016. I don't know if that many, I think it was only about 7 or 8% voted for him, according to exit polls in 2020 as well. If 17% do that, you know, who knows, that could happen. But generally, yeah, usually Democrats are going to get voted in by a mixed coalition of people. And Republicans tend to get voted in by white guys and the elderly, and the white elderly.
The lowest amount of experience, real life world experience, and people who tend to be more emotional on negative things.
So you just want to accuse these people of being experiencing more negative emotions, and that's why they can't vote. Okay, so we look at the demographic in the country right now that is suffering from the highest rates of depression, unaliving, self-unaliving, substance abuse disorders, and a variety of other things, and other antisocial and what do you call them, maladaptive mental health issues. It's middle-aged white men. So you're going to take a look at that group and all the issues that they have with rage, depression, loneliness, isolation, substance abuse, and self-harm, and say, you get to run things, because clearly your man stuff, your testosterone, gives you that big brain energy to coldly and coolly, calmly think your way through any problem. As long as they aren't high or drunk or sad or all three, or screaming at their neighbors or losing their shit, or are terrified and lonely or paranoid or what. So I'm trying to figure out how you would. Generally, I don't like young people because they tend to feel things, and women, oh my God, they care about others. But men, especially adult men who have jobs and stuff, they know how to keep it together. Their rates of gambling addiction, not an issue. Their problems with abuse, never been a problem. Substance abuse issues, I mean, we all like a drink from time to time, right? But we are the ones that need to really take the reins of this country and lead it into a golden age of economic prosperity, and let these people, these bleeding hearts, just have their own private room to cry. Am I right, brothers? Am I right? Like, Jesus. Nothing about this works, and nothing about this is fresh. This is the same turned over, moldy bullshit that misogynists have been using for a long time. This is just old-fashioned rank chauvinism. Like, we don't want the young voting because, well, they're young. We don't want women voting because you know why. These other people from these other countries, I mean, are they shithole countries? I don't know. I mean, sure, they got their citizenship, but I don't want them engaging in politics. They weren't born here. Oh, sorry, Doug. Sorry, that's me going nativist. That's a bridge too far. Careful of the groups that you associate with, Doug. Eventually, you're going to run into one that's going to realize that you weren't born here, and you will be out of the club.
Unless their vote aligns with Pine Creek Doug's, then they can vote. Now, I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing
Yes,
out the truth.
You're not pointing out the truth. If you're pointing out the truth that if you just disenfranchise huge segments of the American economy, it would completely change the results of American elections, obviously it would. That's because your hypothetical requires us to entertain the idea maybe it's possible that we can just segregate, we can just disenfranchise huge portions of our population and prevent them from voting.
Is there anybody who disagrees with what I said, that Democrats wouldn't have a chance if women couldn't vote, and Republicans wouldn't have a chance if men couldn't vote? Democrats wouldn't have a chance if young people didn't vote, let's say under the age of 25. Republicans wouldn't have a chance if old people, let's say over 70, wouldn't vote. So what tends to happen is people who are paying taxes, who tend to be older, or people who've retired and they want to make sure their Social Security that they paid into comes back to them. Those are the people who vote Republican. Probably 55, 60% male, married, kids, pay taxes.
And have and they haven't demonstrated that they have any problems with any of these. Like, there are an enormous number. There are a lot of men in this country. Like, he's talking about a shrinking demographic. Like, and all he's talking about is like, well, what we do is we assemble a meritocracy where people who win at capitalism, because the point of determining, you don't need to figure out who's good and who's bad. You just wait for people to show you what they get paid. If they've got a lot of money and a big house, then clearly the economy has blessed them and rewarded them with a seal of goodness, and that person should be allowed to vote. Anyone else should fuck off, right? I mean, that's all where he's going here. Like, we just find the winners in the economy and let them continue to vote. And the people that lose at the economy, we brush them off because we'll be better off. Okay. So what he's talking about is a society that doesn't actually respond to people in the society. He's basically saying, instead of a constitution, we just adopt the Matthew principle. And the Matthew principle is simple. Those that gain, get it all. And those that lose everything, right? Losers, kick them to the curb, make things harder for them, take every last thing that they've got and give it to the people who were making money and doing good and already getting rewarded. You want to reward people who are winning and people that are having a tough time. You want to make things harder for them because clearly they're screwing up. You can tell the market is rewarding this person, back his play. The market is punishing that person, kick them while they're down. That is not a great way to run what we'd call a civil society. That's an excellent way to create sort of a what's dystopia? Yeah, that's the word. A complete fucking dystopia that everyone would be miserable in. And I would argue even the people being rewarded in that would probably have a difficult time. We already have that quite a bit now. There's a reason why cities like Portland and parts of California, Hawaii, actually coast to coast now, are struggling with incredibly high rates of homelessness. And some of the interesting ideas about dealing with that homelessness is just to make homelessness illegal. Why not, right? Oh, you lost your home, you failed at capitalism. Now it's a crime. I mean, that sounds right. Does that sound like somebody coolly and calmly thinking through it? Or does it sound like somebody who's angry and disgusted by people that lose at capitalism, kicking them while they're down? It just sounds like fear and hate to me.
Democrat Party, it's 55, 60% female, young, don't pay taxes. Now people hear that and say, oh, of course they pay taxes. You know what I mean. I'd look for data on that, and it's really hard to find.
Canada doesn't take back quitters. Doug. Yeah, Doug turned his back on Canada a long time ago. I can't imagine, the Maple Mafia wanting him back in. Yeah, they're always going to be like, Where have you been in America all this time? Where'd you say you live in? Arizona? Oh, no. No.
But the majority of voting people in this country do not pay taxes, or the very federal income tax.
A lot of
And
working poor don't.
If they do, it's very little, and they get more benefits than they paid in. But I'm talking
Quite a few, yeah.
people who actually pay more into than they get back out.
He's talking about me.
It's the minority.
So I get 2 votes. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, I agree, Pablo. Young people don't vote in the same percentages as older people. But there's still, I forget the numbers on it. I looked it up one time.
I get the impression he just despises taxes altogether. I think he sort of was sort of like, we need some. I guess we need some services and stuff because people are gonna, let's say emergency medical services or something. We'll pay some taxes for that. But Doug tends to have this idea that the government runs like a piggy bank kind of finance system where if they don't have enough revenue, they can't pay things out, and if they run out of money, let's say, they what we need to do is just stop paying for these people. We need to stop coddling these people who can't capitalism. If you can't capitalism the way Doug can, then you just deserve to go to Canada, is what I'm getting from Doug.
So something like 15 to 20% of people under 25 vote. Whereas people over, let's say, 60.
I think he would probably be. I don't think you'd have to do a lot of convincing to get him to see that. Property qualifications. Yeah, he definitely sounds like he's watching Scott Adams.
55, I think it's closer to 60% of them vote.
I'm pretty sure Scott Adams probably feels the same way. Like, no, there's only certain people that are allowed to own land, and those ones are the only ones that can vote.
What did I say that was crazy?
I've done my best to illustrate as many as I've found. It's dead air. Doug, come on. Always checking his comments. I should check my comments too. Let's
Insecticide. I don't see how an insecticide can kill a bunch of things and make you feel better with doing nothing for. What are you talking about? You talking about ivermectin?
Doug mainlining Scott Adams and Matt Walsh is the worst possible timeline version. Doug, he needs to bring the goatee back. It's kind of weird. Yeah, if he, it's like the opposite of that Star Trek episode. He gets the goatee, he's good. He clean shaven. That's the bad one. That's the dark universe. I mean, he was alluding to repealing the 19th, right? Exactly. Yeah. And so that checks out. Yeah. Like, well, there's people out here saying, I mean, some of these guys, I got some interesting thoughts on this. This guy named Jib Bob and this Andrew Wilson guy, they're talking about Orthodox Christianity. And so like, hey, just putting this out there, maybe half the country can't vote no more. And what they have to do is be barefoot and pregnant, constantly baking me pies. Oh, Andy want pies. Jim Bob needs his sandwiches. Like what the actual fuck are you guys trying to do here? Like, please keep talking about that. And the funny thing is that they'll bring women on too that are like OnlyFans people, OnlyFans models who probably make 6 times more than they do. And they're on there to bash their life decisions because these women are better at capitalism than these guys are. And these guys are, as far as I know, ostensibly like pro-capitalism, because usually if you're culturally conservative and Christian in this country, you're going to be pro-free market. And these girls know the market, put themselves out there and make tons of money on it. But Andrew Wilson and Jim Bob do not look like those OnlyFans girls that they have on the show. And so I think it's kind of funny listening to those be there and like, well, don't you ever want a kid? And you're going to find it. How are you going to find a real guy? How are you going to find a financially viable guy if you've been putting yourself out here like this? Like, well, it depends on the guy, but there is cause for alarm. If they're fans of Andrew Wilson's show, if they like watching The Crucible or Fresh and Fit or any of this red-pilled bullshit, there's a very good chance that they're going to be like, oh, you were a sex worker? No. I'm not investing in you. bad rate on my return. It's like they read Dickens novels or watch movies, and they just look to all the villains and then start taking notes and then acting as if. It's bizarre to me. Like, you guys are like you're drawing all the wrong conclusions here. This is weird. Yeah, he sounds like he wants to go back to the good old days when white landowners made the rules. Yeah, he does.
If only men could vote, the Democrat platform would be way different than what is now dependent on men. Yes, John Smith, I agree. If women could no longer vote, both parties would change.
Yeah, everything in the country would change. But mostly the fact that you disenfranchised an entire group of people and somehow justified it legally. That would be even bigger than like, he's missing the point of this whole thing. Like, well, can you imagine what would happen to Democrats if women couldn't vote? Like, my man, how on earth did you completely disenfranchise over half the population? That's going to be the bigger story. Not the horse race politics of which party gets to pull ahead every time you have an election. Voting wouldn't matter if you could completely disenfranchise half of the people on the grounds that Jim Bob and Andrew Wilson want women to be that way and think that the country is going to magically work out like that. Stephanie says, well, when you put it that way, I agree with you. That is a statement from PineCreek to Andrew Wilson this year. And for context, that was PineCreek essentially agreeing with Andrew Wilson's very bad, very shady definition of Christian nationalism. His definition of Christian nationalism, well, Christians just want a seat at the table. We just want our chance to give our opinion. I mean, we're tired of all these secularists hogging the limelight. Like, that's not what a Christian nationalist is. And Andrew Wilson better know better, because if he actually talks to real Christian nationalists, they will put him in his place. Yeah, on Christian nationalism, he was not joking. In devil's advocate, and take this for what it's worth, Stephanie, Doug may not have really understood what was going on there. I don't think Doug has done a deep dive in trying to really decipher what Christian nationalism is. The fact that he was just like, oh, okay, Andrew, your definition tracks. I'm fine with it. Like, Andrew's definition wasn't correct, and it still sucked. Doug didn't even bother to, I mean, he didn't even bother to like look into, like, wait a minute, this guy said like secularists have more say than Christians in this country. The only reason Doug's not hostile to that is because he thinks that, you know what? And I can ask him this, if it meant that more people were fiscally responsible against taxes and voted Republican or voted for conservative politics and were not woke, didn't stand up for woke causes, if religion, a little bit of religion led them that way, that's good. Doug thinks that's fine. He's fine with that. Now, he's too full of himself to think that he needs that. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need Christianity. He's bigger brained than that. He can think past that. He doesn't need the church to tell him that woke is bad and all this other stuff. He got there on his own. It's as if like his years as a Mennonite, his formative years as a Mennonite, and his years even as an adult being involved in Christian churches really didn't have an effect on him. He's just managed to think past all that, and he's completely shrugged that off. But he's managed to keep all of the cultural conservative stuff on, and would be interested in, like, you know what? If there's some people out there that have to be exposed to Jesus and the Bible, even though I think it's horseshit, if that's what it takes to get them to vote for Trump, do it up. Getting clear why Doug left my neck of the woods. White people are a minority, and no one trusts the Mennonites because many eschewed health regulations for livestock. Ew. Seriously? Good God, why? No wonder he's burning stuff off himself with like aerosol or whatever it was. I love it when Jim talks like, if you won't marry me at least. All right, I'm not going to read the rest of that. Thank you, Maya. That's fortunately the camera already makes me look beet red, so nobody can see me blush. Needless to say, I disagree with that assessment. I think Doug understands quite well what he's agreeing to. Okay. I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. I'm just holding out that maybe he doesn't quite see every entailment to what he's agreed to. That's my only caveat. Otherwise, I'm about 98% in agreement with what you're saying. Doug likes his milk unpasteurized. He just kneels down and drinks it straight from the cow titty. I shouldn't have said that. I probably just got demonetized for saying Diddy. I'll emphasize the D's.
But I'm saying, given the current milieu of the parties, if women couldn't vote, the Democrats would not have a chance.
The fuck? Yeah, no shit, dude. Like now you just got to get over that crazy hump that Andrew Wilson. At this point, they're talking about sci-fi fan fiction. Imagine a world where no women has the right to vote. Like every woman is like, motherfucker, we've already done that. I don't have to imagine shit. I mean, we still have women alive that are like, yeah, I remember when we couldn't. There's plenty of women currently alive that are like, yes, I remember I didn't have the right to vote. And you're trying to tell my daughters and granddaughters that they should go back to that? You know, I hope that those elderly women would tell someone like Doug, the classic Skylar fiction, that you can go gag on choke on a bag of dicks.
It would have to shift and pivot to being a new type of party.
Yeah. Maya's being inappropriate, and you made me say that word. And both of you were mods. Everyone loses their wrench. I'm just going to do a Germania and just pull wrench. I'm not.
So I think a good thing to do is, in order to vote, you either have to do public service, like join the military. So you could vote at age 18.
Citizenship laws. You know who else was in favor of that? Fascists, mostly. Lots of fascists. You need to serve your country in some capacity. Let me guess. The men, in order to get their citizenship, need to do something manly. They need to go out and kill an enemy of the state, right? Or be willing to get shot by an enemy of the state. The women need to nurse those guys back to health, or teach the kids that their most important thing that they will do is that when they turn 16 or 18 or whatever year it is, that they will serve the glorious motherland or fatherland in bold service. And in exchange for that, they will become a full citizen of that country upon that service. And does the state reserve the right to revoke that? Should those people do something to disqualify themselves? Imagine a world where women have forced pregnancies. Oh, wait. Yeah, exactly. Now I'm thinking Woody Harrelson and Kingpin. We don't have a cow. We have a bull. Great scene. One of my favorite movies. Has not aged all that well, but holy shit. There's some gags in it that are absolutely hilarious. Starship Troopers. Would you like to know more? This is exactly right. Did Doug watch Starship Troopers and was just like, yes? I wonder if he understands that it's satire. Like, because I mean, Heinlein's book really wasn't. Heinlein was kind of a fascist himself. I mean, he really kind of wanted a sci-fi, a society that was strong and Rome-like and kind of warlike. But I mean, that writer and Verhoeven, I can't remember blanking on the screenwriter's name, that they worked on RoboCop, and they did kind of the same thing with RoboCop and Starship Troopers. It was kind of looking at that kind of right-wing authoritarian tendencies and sort of playing them up. And Starship Troopers is notoriously misunderstood. Because if you think they're playing it straight, it is a terrible movie. If you realize that it is all a joke, it's still kind of a terrible movie, but it's a lot of fun. God, it's funny. See, voter suppression. He's pushing for it. He goddamn well knows what he was. Oh, no, in this part, he knows it. Yeah. I just think it's hilarious that he's trying to act like, oh, well, can you imagine what that would do for voting if we just suppressed an entire portion of the population? Yes, I would imagine that the results of elections would indeed be weird. Can we talk about the real problem where you decided to make women second-class citizens? How did you do that? Like, I don't care what happens with voting at that point, because you just turned voting into some kind of stunt. It's no longer like you don't recognize people as being equal citizens in the country anymore. Which might be fine if you're talking about naturalized citizens versus recent immigrants or permanent residents or something like that. That's different. But just saying women no go. Good Lord. Yeah, exactly right. The book is straight face. The movie is satire. Yeah, the movie is hilarious. That's funny. I secretly love that movie. I think I own that movie on. Maybe I don't. I thought I had that on 4K. I think it came out on 4K. It's a fun movie, and the satire is amazingly executed so that it goes over their heads. It's hilarious to me that it goes over their heads even when Nazi Doogie Howser appears on screen. like Doogie Howser as like an SS mind guy, telepath. Like, it doesn't get much more sinister than that, except that it's Neil Patrick Harris, and he's pretty great. But like the fact that there's still people like, huh? I mean, yeah. I mean, we're getting our butts kicked by the bugs, but eventually we turn it around. Like, no, bro, no, that's not the lesson you're supposed to take from that movie.
If you join the military, National Guard, something like that,
The National Guard.
or you put in at least, I don't know, you pay at least $10,000 per year in federal income tax. Now, let's say 5,000, something like that. And if you don't, you got no skin in the game. You shouldn't be allowed to vote to demand other people's money.
It's not other people's money, Doug. It's the government's money. When you pay your taxes, you don't have a claim to it. They can spend it. Now, they're supposed to spend it to represent the needs of the people that paid in. That much is true. However, if somebody's like, I don't want a bridge, what I want is more land from my goats or something like that. Like, yeah, everybody benefits from the bridge, Cletus. Not everyone benefits from you having more acreage for your goats. Well, damn it, what am I paying my taxes for if I ain't getting a rate of return on it? Like, no, we collectively, if you believe this, you collectively pool your money in, and the government manages it and then spends it on services that benefit the majority of people. Things like infrastructure and stuff. Things that the government has not really been bothered to actually put a lot of money into lately. What he's talking about is like, I don't want somebody making, like, so let's say that Doug's correct here. So what he wants to happen in order to prevent people from spending his money, his tax money, he wants to make sure that every voter gets a mandatory education. Mandatory. They have to go do this service. Otherwise, they're not going to vote. And actually, they probably would be forced into the service anyway. That way they still vote. But you want to expose them to an administrative system that is completely communist in structure, completely authoritarian. So what if upon this training, they are all taught the benefits of shared sacrifice, community organizing, cooperation, the good of the many over the good of the one, and they come out of that military service or community service, and they're like, we want 98% taxes on the super wealthy. No one deserves to be a billionaire. That's not how it works. That's not how it worked when we were in service. And we are appalled by the fact that we are expected to accept these sacrifices, take one for the team, to think of something greater than ourselves, only to come out of that service and then vote for leaders who insist that we think that way, but they act otherwise. They're entitled to all the stuff, and they don't have to sacrifice because that's a childish, stupid thing to expect of them. They know better. Their job was getting you to think it was important to sacrifice yourself. And that's how they keep things in check. And if you send a group of people to get that kind of service, I'm starting to agree with Doug now. You just send them in there and you make sure that they develop such a sense of civic nationalism that by the time they're out and trained with military techniques, they just go after the billionaires with something other than torches and pitchforks. Inequality solved. Doug has solved it. He's got a recipe for a massive revolution. I like how everyone forgets that Starship Troopers has 4 movies and an animated series. I don't want to talk about those sequels. Verhoeven didn't direct them, therefore they don't matter. Yeah, exactly. Literally an SS psychic spy in full uniform. Yeah, I mean, the only thing he was missing was like a Vader mask or something, is just incredible. And yet people are just like, I wonder, are they trying to say that the humans are the bad guys? Yes. The bugs are terrified of us.
But like for the people on the left, Democrats, they don't view the money you earn as your money.
It becomes society's money if the government taxes it back. Yes, it does. That money is intended to be used for services that benefit society as a whole, not, I don't see what benefit it's causing. Like, well, I'm thankful that the government, even under Trump, did warp speed and got me my COVID vaccine quick. Doug would hate that. I think Doug feels it's only fair that natural-born citizens endure the same hardship of having to test like he did just for him to be considered a citizen. I'm not convinced he understood at all what he took his test on. Like, he thinks that Biden is initiating lawsuits against Trump. That he makes claims that make me think, like, do you understand how the justice system works in this country? I'm pretty sure Fox News told him. I want to see what the citizenship test has on it, and I want to see how much he cheated.
Society's money, so you need to give it back. True story. Some people on the left think that way. So when you make money, it's not really your money. It's the money that the stupid people have allowed you to have for a time, and then you got to give it back to the government, who will then redistribute it back to the poor people. It's just a money laundering scheme.
That's not money laundering. If that's what he thinks money laundering is, he needs to watch the show Ozark. Jason Bateman will tell you how to launder money. I like this. We don't do charity in Germany. We pay taxes. Charity is a failure of government's responsibilities. Comedian Henning Venn. Yeah.
But I do think that if society gets more and more insane, more and more men are going to say, maybe women shouldn't vote.
This Tremors is another classic. Could be a prequel to Starship Troopers. It would be cool if they linked them together. Mike says, let's not act like most of the money is sent to poor people. That's the other thing he talks about, this kind of like, oh my God, these people are feeling so sorry for these poor people and taxing us blind. Like, no, most of your taxes are going for tax breaks for very wealthy people or to shore up projects to help make them wealthier. They're not going to the poor. Give me a break. That's what food pantries are for. They can figure that out. They don't need to do this. See, does he get a caller here? He gets into some statistics. Oh, wait, he gets into a rant. He's ranting here. Let's see what happens. Nope, he's reading. He's ranting. Oh, no, wait, why is he turning on his music already when there's like this much? Oh, he's going to turn it off. He's going to catch a live. He's going to catch a comment and start getting ranty. Let's not act like most of the money. Yeah, that's a great point. I don't understand what I don't hear these guys complaining about corporate welfare. They are going to give more oxygen in service of trying to talk about, like, well, we need to be really careful about the poors that we help, because I know why he thinks like this. He thinks it's throwing good money after bad. We know the market doesn't like those people, and they failed. Doug is inclined, because of his overdeveloped feelings of fear and disgust, that when you see a person fail at business, the best thing that society can do is to recognize that failure and to treat them accordingly, like failures. You don't give them a reward. You certainly don't give them a meal, because that's like, oh God, now it's like, the strays are going to come back every time. Now they're looking for that free meal. I know this thought process well. I used to live within this thought process, because I did tend to feed my sense of spitefulness and ignorance, because it was easier to react to stuff that I thought was out to get me than it was to think about what I should do about it. And it's interesting to me when guys are motivated by this oftentimes motivated by this, I would do the same thing. I would use the same thing. All I want is for people to take personal responsibility. I just want people to take care of their own crap and leave me alone. I want government to leave me alone. That wasn't at all what I actually wanted. That wasn't what was driving me. I felt like that I was being personally kept back and held back by something in society, mostly other Americans, and I wanted revenge. It's just that simple. And you know what? A lot of studies out there about political psychology when it comes to Republicans, conservatives, bears that out. It's a combination of fear, disgust, and then it usually gets weaponized into a revenge fantasy that gets turned into debate brewing about policy, and how the last thing the last thing that we can afford to do is pay to help poor people improve their lives. But you know what I can do? I can make sure that your yacht is a tax write-off. Why? No, well, because you won and you deserve more. They lost and they deserve to have everything else taken from them too, because they obviously couldn't handle what little bit they had. Read the Gospel of Matthew. I like playing the theme song that he's got a little bit faster. Hey, John Fabiano, congratulations on the fence. I know you've been working on that for a while. Congrats. I did mine years ago and said never again.
Last chance to call in. Oh, see, I play the music and then they call in. Wilhelm. Let's see if I can hear you. Say something. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. I posted the link in there if anybody wants to jump in and say hi real quick. I'm going to wrap it up pretty quick, I think, because I'm hitting just about at the 3-hour mark. But if you do want to come in and say hi, or you have a point that you'd like to give or anything like that, I do want to say one thing about my last show. The last show that I did on Friday night, I had Mr. Anderson on, and we were discussing his conversation with Jim Bob. Stephanie Helms also joined me for that show. And during that, we were talking about it. Jim Bob popped into the live chat, and it was sort of a reaction, kind of a old school reaction for me. He accused Mr. Anderson of editing their conversation in a way that took it out of context to a point where the points that Anderson thought he was making were not the ones he was making. I'm used to hearing these kinds of accusations, especially from debate bros, a certain political ideological bent. And I kind of like thoughtlessly just told him, even though he's had a history with insulting Stephanie Helms, I was like, well, yeah, basically in a more diplomatic way, was like, prove it. Here's the link's there. Why don't you come in here and tell us where he did that, right? And then asked her for her take on it, and she's like, I can't tell you what to do with your show, but I don't, this guy's basically he's a piece of shit, and he is. He's an angry, spiteful, ignorant piece of shit. I probably shouldn't have invited him on because I don't really need to talk to him. I'm not enthusiastic about talking with him. I don't think that he makes good points. I think his dogmatism is stupid. And I think his political philosophy is even worse. But I think in doing that, I think it did lend itself to people. People were some people in the stream were even saying, and in the comments, you're no ally. You shouldn't be. You're just in the same boat as this guy. I think the point they're making is that if I'm going to have a conversation with this guy, I'm doing it for clicks or streams, and I would be complicit with his stuff. I disagree with that. I think if anybody's going to engage a kind of loudmouth, ignorant, conservative reactionary, it is currently loudmouth, possibly ignorant, but former conservative reactionary. That might be beneficial. Hey, Jay, how's it going?
Hey, yeah, has Doug seen Snowpiercer? Because I think that would make for like the perfect wet dream movie for him.
I don't know how many movies he watches, but yeah, he probably should.
But you put all the poor people at the back of the bus. They're clearly the losers of this particular game.
Feed them roach cakes.
Yep.
Yeah. And the wealthiest people just send to sit at the front. Yep.
Yeah. Just like this is. I always wonder, like, has he ever laid out? I guess my main reason for like coming on here was to ask is if Doug has ever laid out what he thinks would be like a general, I don't know, maybe like a general summation of what he would think would be to make America run more efficiently in his view, either economically, politically, whatever.
Maybe disenfranchise an entire segment of the population.
Well, I mean, I wasn't sure if he was actually settled on that. Seems that he's very much entertaining it.
The way he was talking about, like, people are talking. What about this crazy idea? Like, what crazy idea are you talking about, you crazy rooster? There's no reason why you don't have to imagine what it's like for, imagine if half the population just couldn't vote because of their sex/gender. Yeah, we don't have to imagine it. We did it. We've done it. America was damn good at it. Like, it's just the dumbest point. But I do want to finish making this point about Jim Bob and showing up on the show, because Maya, I think, kind of makes a point that is similar. Those people haven't been following you long. Then you've always invited people on when you've been covering them. You did it with Doug, yeah, and even with Doug, even then I sort of like Doug will usually kind of pop up and Darth vomit face, yeah, and Darth is flat out I mean, Darth still has an invitation to come on here. Like if he wants to, he never will. The only reason I extend it, like with open arms, like anytime you want to come in, pop in there and say, I want to talk with you. I will drop a link and I will talk with him. Mostly because I want to tell him, not to his face, but to his avatar, that he's a grifting piece of shit. Well, not even grifting's not fair. He's not making any money off of it. He's just a dogmatic, doofus.
But see, that's what makes him worse, is that he could be making so much money on this if he knew how to get his rhetoric down.
Well, I guess I could insult him for not being a better grifter. Yeah. Like,
There you go.
Why aren't you grifting? Come on, you chud. You got cucked by social media so bad you don't even know how to make a dime off this? Give me a break. All you got to do is just like calm down on the anti-Semitism, the transphobia, the homophobia. Just
if you make everything about just basically a genetic fallacy, saying, well, see, I talked to all these atheists and they can't justify shit to me, so why is anybody being an atheist? You shouldn't want to be an atheist. You should want to be like me.
Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to finish my point. So my point is not to like push back on people that are critical of me. I don't want to do that. If people are critical of me, I want to remind them that if you're critical of me, remind me to listen to more people who are dealing, more people in the LGBT community, because it is easy for somebody like me. It's easy for somebody like Doug, because we do have positions of privilege, to jump in here, make a lot of statements, get a decent amount of positive pushback, and then act like that's okay. And then if one or two or three people are like, hey, you know what? I think you did something shitty. I think you're being inconsistent. We can disregard that because majority rule. But I don't want to operate that way. If somebody has an issue with that and they want to point criticism my way, I want to hear it. But the only thing that I would ask that they do is to consistently remind people like me in my position in this space to keep listening. And if you have literature, videos, anything like that you think would help steer me into a more thoughtful direction, don't be afraid to share them with me. I will look into them. I will look at them. I can't promise that I'm going to completely understand them, but I do want to understand it as best I can, and not misrepresent, because I've getting pulled into these conversations from my state. I recognize that I am the target for somebody like Andrew Wilson or Jim Bob or even somebody like Doug. I'm a cishet white guy with maybe average intelligence or above average intelligence. They want me talking their game. They've already ruled out trans people. They have no interest in talking to trans people. They have no interest in hearing their stories and understanding their experience. What they want me to do is to stop talking to those trans people, trying to think about what their experiences might be like, and then offering any kind of, like, albeit clumsy and usually wrong-footed, defense for their circumstances. That's, for their case. That's what they're trying to do. They want more guys like me, and frankly like you, Jay, to be radicalized into their goofy, anti-woke, whatever.
I'm not that fucking motivated.
Right. And so maybe they're not. I mean, you got a Joker icon there, so maybe they're like, I don't know if I can convince this. Like, do you start fires? Yeah. What are you more inclined to attack, orphanages or the cops? Like,
well, aren't you angry? Aren't you angry when these 6'4" guys identify as women and start stealing medals from women in Olympic sports? No, I'm not. I guess those women just need to get stronger.
Row faster. I'm not in your sport.
What's wrong with you?
Because I will say this: I do not have a fully thought out, good take on the trans thing with sports, mostly because, as far as I'm concerned, everybody should be able to compete in anything. But I'm not a competitive person. So being able to weigh in on the nuances of, like, how these committees form this up, how they're going to adjudicate this, is it based?
My favorite is
hang on. Hey, Jay, I'm trying to, yeah. Okay. My point is, I'm probably not going to be the best person to give anything on that. So if I'm talking about general stuff, recognizing people in the LGBT community as being necessary and welcomed people in a community that deserve equal rights and equal treatment under the law and basic consideration, that's always going to be where I default to. Even if Doug is trying to be like, well, if you were a doctor, would you just give a kid hormone therapy after 2 visits? Like, I'm not a doctor, and you're talking about hormone therapy like it's lollipops after a dentist visit. Like, what the fuck is your problem? Like, I'm not a doctor, and neither are you. Knock that shit off. Like, you're not engaging with a hypothetical, bro. Neither are you. That's not a hypothetical either one of us can entertain. You get your degree and come back at me and give me an idea what the rules of care are. That stuff drives me nuts. Anyway, welcome, Stephanie.
I
Lay into
I'm
it.
just here to say thank you. I'm glad I'm here to say thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing. I've been trying to make this point for quite some time, that this isn't really, when you get some of these folks coming on to talk about the number of angels dancing on heads of pins, that's not what they're about. They know that that's the honey trap. That's what they'll get you on. But what they're really here to do is exactly what you said. They're here to present themselves in front of your audience and have, oh, that guy sounds reasonable. What else does he have to say?
Yeah.
And it's working. It works, and it's a little disturbing, but I think people say people misuse the term woke, but woke woke means you be aware of that and do what you can. So I just wanted to stop in. I know you've been going for a while. I just wanted to stop in and say thank you for being
Thank you.
woke.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to give you the last word. I think we're going to get out of here. So thanks everybody in the live chat for chatting. Thanks, Jay. Thank you, Stephanie, for stopping in. I'm going to get out of here because it's 3 minutes and 5 seconds runtime on this. I've been going as long as the Lord of the Rings movie. And I think I might be getting mini blood clots, and I'm worried that I'm going to end up fulfilling one of Doug's prophecies about the COVID vax. So I don't want to do that. Anyway, with that being said, I hope everybody in the live chat has a great time. Thank you for super chats and all that kind of stuff. If you've got comments, thoughts, love mail, hate mail, whatever, jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com, or you can see me over on Twitter, X if you're nasty. Or is it X, Twitter if you're nasty? But it's still Twitter as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Have a good week. I will be back probably midweek to start a review on some old-fashioned Darth Dawkins content. That should be aggravating. And yeah, with that, I guess we're going to get out of here. Stephanie, again, thank you. Jay, thank you.
Thank you.
I thought you were going to give Stephanie the last word.
No, I've said all I needed to say. I'm just,
okay.
I'm a hearty thank you, and I really appreciate your, I really appreciate this approach.
Yeah, thank you. No, Jay, I was just doing that's just channel cleanup. I mean, she had the last good point to make, so it still counts.
Your channel cleanup takes too fucking long.
Says the guy with a Joker avatar. I'm sorry, I don't just like pop smoke and disappear. All right. That being said, folks, take it easy, and I will catch you all next time. We're out of here.